21. Let's just run away. Albanian forest, Lord Voldemort's temporary hideout. Bang! Thud! Two dull impacts sounded almost together with the thump of knees hitting earth. Two charred bodies fell onto the leaf-strewn mossy clearing. A few dying embers of fiendfire still clung to them, like stubborn flies. From behind Barty Crouch Jr.'s head, a black mist surged, condensing into the shape of an infant. The thing had flayed-looking skin, tiny limbs, and two disproportionately large eyes that coldly swept over the corpses and the kneeling man. Barty crouched on shaking knees, his face ashen, his body trembling from the recent possession. Master, I failed. I couldn't bring the Carrows back alive, only their corpses. Please punish me, Master. The infant form of Lord Voldemort did not answer. His emotions were knotted. Anger, scrutiny, doubt, and something he had not felt in a long time, uncertainty. His gaze fell again on the two bodies. Images he had just seen remotely through his scrying connection flickered back into focus. That young wizard's figure, his face, Voldemort's pupils pinched shut. He remembered. 2 years ago, during the year he had lain upon Quirrell's head, he'd encountered a boy who displayed an uncanny interest in certain extracurricular knowledge and an eerie aptitude for it. Then Voldemort had merely offered a few casual pointers, tiny seeds planted to see what might grow in that mediocre school. And now, that boy's killing curse could actually fork? He wasn't drunk, he wasn't hallucinating. How could that be? The notion was preposterous, sensational, almost absurd. Then the scene slid away. A few days later, in Diagon Alley, the epoch-making alchemy magic shop was being put back together. The charred marks outside had been cleaned. Fresh timber and magical supplies were stacked in the corner. Goblin craftsmen from Nocturne Alley rang and sawed, the air filled with the metallic sizzle of enchanted glue as they repaired doors, windows, and counters. Inside, the real upgrades were taking shape. Lynn stood in the center of the shop, waving his control rod. Under his command, several modified heavy guns were slotted into sliding tracks in the ceiling, each concealed under camouflage charms. Muzzle tips peered out from behind chandeliers, vent grills, and framed murals, their angles calculated to cover every entrance, corridor, and display. Click. As the last latch engaged, the weapons vibrated in unison. Runes along their barrels lit up in sequence and then went dim. A magical voice chimed in, Lynn's system giving its report. Defense system Steel Rain integration complete. Circuits clear. Monitoring network stable. System in autonomous alert mode, capable of identifying preset threat signatures. Master, you can assume direct control at any time via the main node or by mental command. Lynn put away his control rod, pleased. He scanned the hidden launch points and casually pointed to a humanoid sandbag in the corner, used for testing enchantment resistance. Target that sandbag. Fire. A low hum filled the air, like the beat of 1,000 wings. Then, rat-tat-tat-tat-tat, muzzles spat burning tongues of flame. Magically enhanced bullets braided into a metal storm at a speed the naked eye could barely follow, and the sandbag was instantly engulfed. Though enchanted with strong defensive charms, its protective glow stuttered under the onslaught. Stuffing flew everywhere. The outer shell split into honeycomb dents and cracks. The din of impacts and ricochets was deafening, swallowing the shop's usual noises. In 2.5 seconds of strafing, the sandbag, designed to withstand a steady barrage of jinxes, was full of holes. The firing stopped, the hum faded. Lynn stepped forward, poked the perforated bag, and nodded. Not bad. Reaction speed, fire density, control precision, all satisfactory. Should be enough for idiots who don't know any better. Having finished the security overhaul, he slipped behind the newly repaired counter and picked up that morning's copy of the Daily Prophet. The headline on the front page was provocative enough to raise an eyebrow. Dumbledore issues stern warning, you know who is not dead. Subhead, Hogwarts' headmaster calls the Dark Lord active in the shadows. The wizarding community urged to remain vigilant. Lynn read on. Pages 2 and 3 carried related reports in more detail. Dark Mark appears in Cairngorms. Ministry launches urgent probe. The article described a recent sighting of an eerie green skull by nearby witnesses. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes and the Auror Office had both investigated. No caster or gathering had been found. Officials leaned toward the possibility of provocation by remaining extremists. 2 charred bodies found deep in Albanian forest, identities suspected to be the Caros. That piece gave more specifics. Charred corpses in a remote wood, inexplicable burns, and strange residual magic at the scene, leaving investigators baffled. An anonymous ministry source speculated the victims might have failed during a dangerous dark arts ritual and been consumed by enduring curses. The article concluded cautiously. Reports of you-know-who's activity were still officially unconfirmed. Meanwhile, at Malfoy Manor, Lucius sat alone in his study. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing the faint network of mark and connection over his skin, sharper now than it had been 2 days ago. A copy of the Daily Prophet lay open before him. He kept glancing between the paper and the mark, especially at the timing of the incidents. He remembered, with a sudden, sickening clarity, Lynn's visit that early morning, the thinly veiled inquiry about the Caros and the way Lynn had left. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. The timing, it matched. Too well. If it wasn't coincidence, then Lynn had taken the information Lucius had given him, traced the Caros' location with frightful speed, and eliminated them. Worse, he might have done it right as they were answering a summons and heading to meet with him. A hair-raising thought spiraled into place. What if Lynn hadn't merely killed the Caros? What if he'd killed them in front of you-know-who while they were responding to that very signal? Merlin. Lucius gripped the back of his chair as dizziness washed over him. If the Dark Lord was truly stirring in the shadows, and if the deaths of the Caros were tied to Lynn, where did that leave Lucius? He was the one who had pointed the Caros out to Lynn. If Voldemort learned that, how would he judge him? Cruelty tempered by intelligence would have no patience for mistakes. It felt as if the House of Malfoy had been fastened between two colliding killing curses with no way to escape. Lucius let out a long, hollow sigh. His head throbbed. The only coherent thought that rose above the panic was blunt and simple. Perhaps he should take his family and run. 2-2, a bright future awaits. Time slipped away like sand through one's fingers, and in the blink of an eye, it was August 1994. Once the thought of fleeing arises, the world suddenly feels wide. That line had become Lucius Malfoy's private creed during this time, the single driving force behind his frantic actions. He had never been as diligent as he was now. In the gray corners of the wizarding world, in the salons of old acquaintances, at banquets for the newly wealthy, even in some of the less reputable private clubs, Lucius's hurried figure could be seen. Mr. Shafiq, have you considered it? My small dragon farm in Romania, while not large, has a pure bloodline and reliable channels. As you know, the market for dragon materials is on the rise. Lucius, my friend, the current market, you and I both know it well. At the price you're asking, I'd have to slash it to the bone before I'd even dare take those fire-breathing troublemakers off your hands. The smile on Lucius's face froze. Slash it to the bone? He'd rather let them rot in my hands. At least then I could occasionally harvest a few dragon eggs. It seems we cannot reach an agreement for the time being, Mr. Shafiq. I wish you a pleasant day. Mr. Knott, my magical materials refining workshop in Yorkshire, brings in enough profit to support a family's decent life for several years. This price is an absolute steal. Lucius, haven't you been selling off properties lately? Cash flow tight? Tell you what, I can accept the price, but as for payment, maybe installments, or use some equivalent ancient magical artifacts to offset the debt. Installments? Offsetting debt? Sorry, Mr. Knott, I only accept cash in galleons, paid in full at once. If that's unsuitable, then forget it. I believe Mr. Borgin and others who value quality will be interested. There were, fortunately, moments when deals did go through. Mr. Bulstrode, the terms are clear, the assets clean, and the Ministry of Magic records complete. If you have no objections, we can sign the contract now and complete the galleon transfer at Gringotts. In just over a month, Lucius had liquidated a large portion of the Malfoy estate, selling at prices that ranged from high to rock bottom, effectively a fire sale. He had even obsessively purchased and prepared multiple safe houses in secret locations across the globe, each stocked with vast stores of food, water, potions, gold, and defensive alchemical items. Tonight he sat in a private box at a club, meeting Mr. Barton, a retired master famed for his expertise in ancient spells and defense against the dark arts. Lucius hoped to secure private tutoring for Draco to give him an edge for whatever might come. Master Barton, though Draco is young, he is naturally gifted. What we need is not just the standard education at Hogwarts, but something more. Lucius spoke smoothly, attempting to sway the eccentric master with galleons and the Malfoy name. Just as he was preparing to state his final offer, a sudden burning sting shot through the inside of his left forearm. The dark mark on his skin flared hot. Lucius's words died on his lips. His mind went wild. The Dark Lord isn't dead. He's returned and is summoning his scattered servants. Panic overtook him. My apologies, Mr. Barton. Lucius sprang up. I have an extremely urgent matter to attend to immediately. Today's conversation will reschedule. I'm truly, deeply sorry. He fled the box without waiting to see the other man's stunned expression. Master Barton reached out toward the doorway in vain. Mr. Malfoy, wait, we can discuss the compensation. I can reduce the lesson fees as appropriate. Mr. Malfoy? The Lestrange family ancestral home had long been abandoned after its owners were imprisoned, a place of rot and neglect. Tonight, the dilapidated hall was lit in a way that rarely happened. Lucius wrapped his cloak tighter around himself, pallid, following the burning mark on his arm to this place. He was not the only one summoned. In the gloom stood several others, cloaked to hide their faces. From their crouched postures, Lucius recognized a few. They were former Death Eaters. Like him, they had claimed to have been controlled by Imperius after the war and had narrowly avoided Azkaban. Their situations were far worse than that of the Malfoys. At the end of the hall, in the Lestrange head seat, sat a figure entirely shrouded in a hooded robe. It seems you have not completely forgotten your master, the voice said. It was the Dark Lord, but somehow different, weaker or restrained. Lucius dared not dwell on it. He and the others lowered their heads deeply. After the hooded figure spoke, a long silence followed. Lucius's heart pounded. He didn't know what the Dark Lord intended. Was he testing them? Building rage? He could not wait. He had to declare himself. Summoning his courage, Lucius took a small step forward. Master, you have finally returned. Your most loyal servant, Lucius Malfoy, is at your command. He put special emphasis on loyal. The figure on the dais shifted slightly. The shadow of the hood turned toward him. Loyalty. Soon I shall see your loyalty. I command you, at the upcoming Quidditch World Cup final, to announce my return to the whole world. Let those cowards and traitors tremble in fear. Announce it at the World Cup. The order spun in Lucius's head, but at that moment, hesitation would be fatal. As you command, great master, he replied immediately. Whether it could be done was another question. His posture and obedience had to be perfect first. The hood swept the room again, and the raspy voice spoke a name that made Lucius's breath hitch. At Hogwarts, there is a student named Lynn. Lucius's chest tightened. I want him. Make him understand who is a master truly worth following. Make him submit and serve me. If, the hooded figure paused, if he is obstinate and refuses my kindness, then eliminate him to remove any future trouble. The final words sent a chill through bone and marrow. Lucius and the other Death Eaters bowed in unison, their voices echoing in the empty hall. Yes, as you wish, master. As soon as the words left their mouths, Lord Voldemort vanished from sight. No one witnessed the smile that flickered across Lucius's lowered face. Lynn already held such power that even the Dark Lord worried about him. The Malfoys could be considered to have some friendly ties with Lynn. Perhaps that could be exploited. In that case, it might be time to activate the Malfoy family's ancestral skill, defecting. Why run? On one side stood a Dark Lord who had failed once, on the other, a young wizard who even the Dark Lord feared and now sought to win over or eliminate. Just thinking about it, the future looked bright. 203. Close the door and beat the dog Friday, the day before the Quidditch World Cup. Before dawn had even broken, a broomstick sliced through the low night and wobbled down into Lynn's yard. Edgar Burns, wrapped in a heavy traveling cloak and grinning with the thrill of a prank well played, landed lightly. As soon as his feet hit the grass, he drew a deep breath and shouted up at the closed bedroom window at the top of his lungs. Lynn, get up! The sun's burning your backside. Your good brother's here to bring you some warmth. The shout had barely left his mouth when the courtyard, which had been quiet a moment before, erupted in light. A translucent barrier etched with swirling runes rose from the ground like an inverted bowl, sealing the house and yard off from the outside. Then an emotionless, synthesized voice echoed from everywhere at once, crisp and clinical. Home Defense Protocol, third sequence. Activated. Detected unknown biological unit approaching the residence during non-social hours without an appointment. Energy reading low. Threat assessment, mild intrusion. Execution plan, closing the door to beat the dog. Clack, clack, clack. Mechanical slides and metallic clanks rang from the exterior walls, the bases of garden statues, even from harmless-looking fruit trees. Dozens of dark muzzles and anti-aircraft barrels slid out and locked on the lone figure in the center of the yard. Edgar Burns. His smile froze. The hand he'd raised to knock hung suspended in midair. He turned his head slowly and saw a device on the left wall aimed at his head, its barrel glowing a dangerous red, and a silver short tube on a tree branch to his right, covered in runes and trained on his knees. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Wait, wait! It's a misunderstanding. I'm one of you. Lynn, help! Crack. Lynn appeared in the doorway in his pajamas, hair mussed and one hand rubbing his eyes, still only half awake. He took in the dark sky beyond the barrier, then looked at the pale, trembling Edgar standing under a dozen muzzles, fully kitted and grinning like an idiot. His brain clearly hadn't finished booting. He blinked. Edgar, what are you doing here? He waved his hand in irritation. The barrier around the yard dissolved like a receding tide, and the muzzles slid back into their hiding places. Edgar sagged with relief, almost sitting down where he stood. He wiped his forehead and forced an awkward smile. I came to ask if you're going to the World Cup. Lynn regarded him for a few seconds. The morning air, a little chill, finished waking him up. Disbelief creased his face. He sputtered a string of half-friendly greetings that were automatically censored by some security filter. Are you daft? Flying here in the middle of the night, waking me up with a volume fit for a troll, and then asking, are you going to the World Cup? He rubbed his throbbing temples. Also, didn't your parents say they'd take you a few days ago? Edgar scratched his head and grinned sheepishly. Plans change. The World Cup's chaos. Ministry departments are stretched thin, people getting reassigned to logistics and security. My parents got drafted. They had to report early this morning, so... He shook the large bag behind him. Since I'm already here, how about we go together? We can call William and Ollie. Lynn sighed and nodded. Since Edgar was here already, and no, he wasn't about to wake William and Ollie from their warm beds just to share the joy. Lynn wasn't that nice. Dudu, he called into the house. Pop! Dudu appeared wearing a clean tea towel. Master, have you finally decided to dispose of this noisy wizard who set off the defenses at dawn and nearly got himself turned into minced meat? Dudu can help throw him far away so he won't disturb the neighbors. Edgar, Lynn waved him off. Pack the luxury travel tent with the expandable space and heated pool, the camping utensils, the food crates. Yes, grab the automatic grill. We're going to the World Cup. Dudu curled his lip and vanished to pack. Let's go. Get in the car. Lynn headed for the garage. Get in the car? Edgar stared at his broom, stunned. Aren't we flying? Too slow. Lynn didn't look back. I'm driving something more low-key. A few minutes later, a sleek, brand-new car was backed out of the garage, its finish catching the dim light. It had no exhaust pipe and faint levitation runes glowed along the chassis. Edgar, William and Ollie, both of whom had been roused from bed by Lynn's emergency call, drowsily climbed into the spacious vehicle, their bags already packed by Dudu. Everyone, fasten your seatbelts, Lynn said. Hum. A low, powerful hum filled the cabin. Before Edgar and the others could properly react, the car's wheels tucked in, the runes flared, it lifted smoothly off the ground and then shot into the sky. Whoa! The three lads cried in surprise as the car did everything but behave like a broom. The ride was anything but comfortable. Heads up, morning mist bank ahead. We'll detour a bit. No, actually, let's go straight through. Sharp turn. Lynn whooped, and the car drew a nearly 90-degree arc. Centrifugal force threw Edgar and the others sideways. See that early rising owl? Let's say hi. Close pass. Knife edge overtake. They sped past so close, they brushed the ruffled wings of a startled owl. The clouds below look thick. Time for a through-the-clouds dive. The car plunged into a layer of cloud. Visibility went white. Then the vehicle dove downward and leveled off only at treetop height in the forest below, spraying up dew. When the car finally came to a wobbling stop at the foot of an ordinary steep hill near the village of Ottery St. Catchpole in Devon, the doors opened and blur! Cough, cough, blur! Edgar, William, and Ollie stumbled out, clinging to a large rock, retching and pale, eyes full of spinning stars. Edgar groaned between heaves. Lynn, is this your idea of blur? Good driving? Lynn shut the car door and the vehicle drove itself back to the garage. He wandered over with an innocent grin. How was it not good? It was thrilling. Air drifting, close passes, cutting through clouds, all the moves. The whole trip was smooth. Not even a feather on that owl was touched. The three of them said nothing. William steadied his glasses and waved feebly. No more. Let us catch our breath before climbing the hill. He sat on the ground, indifferent to dirt and dew. Ollie found a slightly cleaner rock, closed his eyes, and tried to breathe slowly to calm his queasy stomach. Edgar collapsed on his back with a thump, legs numb with aching. Next time, kill me. I still won't take your car. Broomsticks are better. After a long time, they recovered enough to stand. William looked around. Steep slope, dense undergrowth, a village outline in the distance. Is this the World Cup campsite? It doesn't look like it would handle that many people. Of course not, Edgar explained. This is Stoatshed Hill. The World Cup camps elsewhere. This is the nearest official portkey point. William nodded and stopped asking questions. I'm rested, Edgar said, forcing himself to his feet, brushing dirt from his trousers. William straightened his glasses. Ollie nodded and rose silently. Shall we? Let's go. They set off along a rough, uneven path. The climb took longer than they thought. By the time they reached the summit, panting, the eastern sky had gone from black to pale. Huff! If I'd known, I would have just rode my broom. Edgar wheezed, hands on his knees, calves trembling. Lynn, unflushed and unfazed, glanced at him. Oh, at the bottom of the hill, weren't you the one saying, think of it as exercise. Going up is more meaningful. Just then, before they could start searching for the portkey, a familiar voice called from to one side and behind them. Yo, Edgar! Edgar turned when he heard footsteps on the path and saw Cedric approaching the hilltop platform, linked arm in arm with a black-haired girl, Cho Chang. Cedric wore a gentle smile. Cho's cheeks were flushed, whether from the walk or something else Edgar couldn't tell. They moved together with an easy intimacy. Good morning, Cedric, Edgar said, then nodded to Cho. And good morning, Cho. How did you sleep last night? Tired from getting up so early? Cho's face went even redder. She gave an embarrassed little smile and murmured, It was fine. Lynn, watching from the side, clicked his tongue and elbowed Edgar. Tsk! Edgar, what kind of question is that? Where's your social awareness? How is she supposed to answer? I slept well or I didn't? Edgar scratched his head, genuinely baffled. Did I say something wrong? He glanced at William and Ollie. One adjusted his glasses and stared at the sky. The other looked down at the ground and pretended not to hear. Cedric's smile froze for a heartbeat. His ears pinked. He shot Lynn a helpless look, as if wondering why he'd never noticed how sharp-tongued Lynn could be. He cleared his throat and hastily changed the subject. Are you all here for the portkey to the World Cup too? Lynn nodded. Yeah, dorm group outing. What about you? Are you with family? Yeah, Cedric answered, recovering his composure. Me, Cho, and my father. We bumped into the Weasleys, Harry Potter, and Hermione Granger, and we agreed to use the same portkey so it's livelier. So many people, Edgar exclaimed. Are they all behind you? At that moment, the rest of the group arrived. Down a wider approach, a noisy procession of footsteps and voices climbed the hill. Led by Arthur Weasley, a large party filed up, Amos Diggory among them, loudly arguing with Mr. Weasley about something that sounded work-related. Everyone carried heavy bags and looked winded from the climb. Oh, Cedric, you're already here! And Lynn, what a coincidence! Mr. Weasley wiped sweat from his brow and greeted them warmly. After a round of good mornings, the larger group joined Lynn and the others at the clearing where the portkey box sat. Mr. Weasley opened the box and pulled out a dirty, slightly moldy old boot. Lynn felt a cold little premonition. Mr. Weasley called cheerfully, Quick, quick, gather round. Everyone just reach out a finger and touch it. The crowd struggled to squeeze together. Aside from Lynn's group of 4, most people were laden with backpacks and sacks. They jostled until finally they could all reach the moldy leather. Everyone ready. 3, Mr. Weasley counted down. 2. 1. There was a sharp tug in Lynn's stomach as if an unseen hook jerked him from behind, and the world spun. Of course, the portkeys maker was that eccentric sort who delighted in extreme tumbling rides. Lynn had recognized the signature wrench of centrifugal force. "Wah!" came a collective cry. "My breakfast!" Lynn, who had been through one of those portkeys before, landed on his feet relatively unshaken, hair mussed and robes a little askew, but steady. The others weren't as lucky. Around him, retching and coughing broke out. Edgar and William collided and nearly toppled headfirst into a nearby thicket, groaning. 507 from Stoatshed Hill, a toneless voice announced. 2 ministry officials in uniforms, Basil and Frank, stood nearby with parchment and quills to register arrivals. Mr. Weasley forced a smile, greeting them while tossing the used boot into an open wooden box already overflowing with spent portkeys, rusty cans, crumpled papers, flattened soda cans, scorched light bulbs, a motley pile that looked like trash. "Good morning, Arthur," Basil said in a weary voice, his dark circles making him look haunted. "You'd better clear the way and get ready. There's another large group coming through that way soon. Let's see." He flipped through his list. "Weasley, campsite is about a quarter-mile ahead, first field. Manager is Mr. Roberts, a muggle. Remember to comply with the International Statute of Secrecy." Lynn stepped forward and showed his ticket, one Lucius Malfoy had kindly sponsored earlier. Frank glanced at it, gave Lynn a quick scan, and immediately brightened. "Mr. Lynn, your campsite is further on, about half a mile. There'll be a sign on the left. The manager for that area is Mr. Adolf. Enjoy the match." He offered the briefest smile before reverting to his previously severe expression. Mr. Weasley shepherded his large party toward the first campsite. The path grew more crowded with excited wizards from all over the world, chattering and laughing. After another 20 minutes, a simple wooden cabin appeared beside the road with a sign, Campsite Area A, Manager, Roberts. Through the open doorway, the land beyond was already densely packed with hundreds of tents. The Weasleys and the Diggories stopped there. Lynn and his companions pressed on following Frank's directions. A little later, a more refined cabin came into view on the left. VIP Reserved Area, Manager Adolf. The VIP field was a study in contrast. The grass was greener, trees were neatly trimmed, and tents were few and far between. Some enclosures looked extraordinarily luxurious. Gardens, terraces, even small fountains. They quickly found a flat patch of lawn with a good view, tucked beside a cluster of bushes that bloomed with faintly glowing, fluorescent flowers. Dudu was already there, waiting with the small luggage. "This is the place, Master," he chirped in a high voice, already beginning to level the ground with a smoothing charm. "It's much quieter than the noisy area run by the Muggle manager. I've checked the neighbors. They seem decent, and Mr. Malfoy has prepaid the campsite fee. Shall Dudu set up the tent now?" Lynn nodded. "Yes, the one with the pool and the observation deck, like we discussed." Under Dudu's hands, the tent unfolded, modest from the outside, but expanded inside by undetectable extension charms. It contained a temperature-controlled magical pool, an open-air observation deck, and a comfortable living area. Everything they would need for the World Cup. Evening was approaching. The setting sun painted the horizon warm orange and deep purple, and the smell of dinner smoke drifted over the campsite. George and Fred led the way, followed by Ginny, Harry and his friends, and Cedric and Cho. The group chatted and laughed as they threaded between tents toward the VIP area where Lynn and his group were staying. They stopped at Lynn's tent. The twins exchanged a look. "Surprise!" One on the left and one on the right, they whipped the tent flap open with a swish and swaggered inside. Around a long table covered in clean oilcloth sat Edgar, William, and Ollie, intently threading various ingredients onto thin bamboo skewers. Chunks of onion, slices of green pepper, mushrooms, marinated chicken, and beef. A small pile of finished kebabs already sat in front of them. Startled by the twins' sudden entrance, all three of them jerked. Edgar nearly jabbed his own hand with a skewer. "Merlin's beard," he complained. "Couldn't you just—" His complaint trailed off when he looked up and brightened. "Hey, it's you lot! Brilliant!" Just then, Lynn emerged from the inner living area, carrying a large tray of prepared barbecue sauce. A sizable metal grill floated beside him, next to Dudu. Seeing the crowd, he showed no surprise. He set the sauce down and clapped his hands. Oh, look who's here. Perfect timing. I take it you haven't eaten yet? What had been intended as a casual drop-in quickly turned into something else. Under Edgar and the others' enthusiastic welcome, the visitors were pressed into service, skewers and ingredients thrust into their hands. As the pile of finished kebabs grew, Ron suddenly looked up from a heap of green pepper slices, realization dawning on his face. He glanced from the greasy skewer in his hand to his friends, all similarly at work, and asked in disbelief, "Wait, we're underage. Why aren't we using magic for this?" Activity paused as everyone looked at one another. Ron had a point. Lynn's voice drifted from the tent entrance. "Because," he said, "according to Article 27, Third Amendment of the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, underage witches and wizards are strictly forbidden from performing magic outside of school. The ministry's trace is watching. You'd be asking for trouble." A beat of silence. Then George and Fred lost it first, bursting into laughter. George pointed at Lynn. "Ha! Lynn, are you serious? Look me in the eye. Tell me, what are you doing with that wand you're waving around?" Lynn didn't bother to turn. He kept brushing sauce and flipping skewers with practiced, fluid motions. His use of magic was natural and unforced. Cedric glanced at Lynn's "I don't hear you" expression, then at the half-finished skewer in his hand and the neatly stacked ingredients, and couldn't help laughing too. "He might just want to give us something to do," he said. Lynn finally turned and gave Cedric a thumbs up. The message was clear. Under a smattering of mock scolding looks, the skewering was finished in short order. Soon the first batch of sizzling, oily kebabs came off the grill. "All right, who wants the first one?" "Me. Give it to me. I want that chicken wing." Night fully fell, and the stars began to glimmer overhead. After everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, the young people left the messy battlefield to Dudu, who complained all the way through cleaning but handled it efficiently. They left the tent and drifted into the livelier parts of the campsite. As the night deepened, more and more underage witches and wizards filled the grounds, and the festive mood rose. Personal tent decorations gave way to team colors and logos. When a flag bearing the Bulgarian team mascot and Bulgaria, Bulgaria was hoisted high, it seemed to spark a competitive fire. Shamrock flags for Ireland, various scarves and glowing posters of star players sprang up across the site until the campsite that had been a jumble of tastes and styles began to look like clearly divided fan zones. Lynn's group stopped to watch a large magical firework display put on by several American teens. Fireworks burst into running thunderbirds, circling fire, even a short Quidditch animation drawing applause. Then a voice cut through the noise, high and shrill. "Potter!" No one needed to look back to know who had shouted. They turned toward the sound. In front of an extremely luxurious tent stood Draco Malfoy, impeccably dressed in a tailored dark green suit, hair slicked into place, chin lifted. He was giving Harry Potter the universal sign of insult, a raised middle finger. Edgar elbowed Lynn and whispered, "How does he manage to spot Harry from that far away in a crowd this big? What kind of eyesight is that?" Lynn shrugged. "I don't know. If I were trying to find someone in that crowd, I'd have to look for ages. He's like he's got radar." The two shared a look. Malfoy's obsession with noticing Harry felt uncanny. Harry turned and saw Draco's gesture. Not to be outdone, he returned the salute before turning back to watch the fireworks. The scene around Draco wasn't over. The curtain of his luxurious tent was pulled aside, and a group of figures emerged. A little way behind Draco walked Lucius Malfoy, as immaculate as ever, leaning on his cane. Lucius glanced disapprovingly at his son, who was still mugging at Harry, and murmured something, probably a reprimand about keeping up appearances. Then his gaze drifted over the crowd and happened to land on Lynn, who was speaking quietly with Edgar. Lucius's eyes widened. "Mr. Lynn?" Lynn stared back. "Do all the Malfoys have such keen eyesight?" The son zeroed in on Harry, and the father picked out Lynn at a glance. Lucius barely hesitated before tucking his cane under his arm and striding through the crowd toward them. "Good evening, Mr. Malfoy," Lynn said first, his tone flat. "What a coincidence. Do you need something?" Lucius's gaze swept briefly over the onlookers before he lowered his voice. "Good evening, Mr. Lynn. It is quite the coincidence. Since we've met, perhaps we could speak in private? Certain matters might involve business confidences." It's a bit too crowded and public here, Lynn replied. How about we find somewhere quieter to talk for a few minutes? It won't take much of your time, and you'll still be able to enjoy the evening. Inside the tent, a small, temporarily partitioned reception area glowed softly with lamps, cut off from the clamor outside. Lucius Malfoy and Lynn sat opposite each other across an exquisitely carved coffee table. The air felt oddly stagnant. Lucius's fingers absently rubbed the head of his cane. He opened his mouth several times, but the words stuck. "Mr. Lynn, he began, then faltered. Lynn leaned back in his chair, relaxed. He picked up the iced watermelon juice Dudu had left on the table and took a sip. "Mr. Malfoy," he said, "we've been business partners for some time. If there's something you want to say it. Beating around the bush wastes brain cells." Lucius drew a deep breath. Images flashed through his mind. The Dark Lord's cold gaze, the charred corpses of the Carrows in the paper, Draco's bewildered face, Narcissa's worried eyes. They condensed into a single brutal calculus, survival above all, and a Malfoy's way of surviving is to attach himself to power. Whose servant he became mattered less than whether the patron could protect his family. He forced himself to believe it, snapped his eyes open, and resolved. With a flick of his right hand, he threw aside his robe hem, leaned forward, and dropped to his knees. The movement was so sudden, Lynn nearly sloshed juice across his lap. He practically bounced out of his chair and darted aside in a single fluid motion, a gust of air stirring the tent. Internally, he thundered. Did all former Death Eaters go to a class on how to kneel quickly and properly before the strong? The Carrows begged like that in public, and now even Lucius Malfoy? Is this an institutional tradition? As Lucius's knees hit the carpet, Lynn had no intention of receiving such a theatrical obeisance. With a casual flick of his wand, he arrested Lucius's descent. A subtle force held the former Death Eater halfway between standing and kneeling, awkward, humbling, and undignified. "Mr. Malfoy," Lynn's voice rose a notch. "We are business partners. Our cooperation has been pleasant. There's no need for such a grand gesture. Have you encountered a monumental difficulty? A break in your capital chain? A family curse? Or have you been hauled in by the ministry for a capital offense?" He rattled off plausible reasons that might require an unseemly plea for help. "If any of those are true, perhaps I can offer modest assistance. Let's discuss it properly." Held in that mid-posture, Lucius looked ridiculous. He recognized that Lynn had completely misread his intention. Panic sharpened his features, and he spoke rapidly. "No, Mr. Lynn, you misunderstand. It's not that kind of trouble. What I mean is that from this day forward, the House of Malfoy is willing to follow your lead." He enunciated the last words as clearly and forcefully as he could, and then watched Lynn's face. Lynn stared. For a few heartbeats, he seemed genuinely baffled. Then his expression slid into disbelief. He checked his own face as if the world had glitched. Was his translator broken? That couldn't be right. Had Lucius been drinking the camp's fake wine? First, the theatrical kneel, and now this, offering the House of Malfoy to him, a student? Lynn's hand found his jaw without thinking. Did he really look like some underworld boss who needs sycophants to kneel around him? Had the Hufflepuff reputation shifted while he wasn't looking? After a beat, Lynn sheathed his wand and leaned forward, adopting an almost comically earnest tone. "Mr. Malfoy, I think you need to go to St. Mungo's and sign up for an emergency psychiatric consultation. Find an experienced healer and get checked. Don't worry about the cost. The House of Malfoy can afford it." He eyed Lucius over. "If you continue talking to me in this less-than-lucid state, I can't promise my reflexes won't do something sudden to help you sober up." Lucius froze, suddenly aware of how grotesque his earlier display must have looked. He smoothed his wrinkled robes, straightened up, and assumed a formal, measured tone, though his message remained earth-shattering. "Mr. Lynn, believe me, I am sober, soberer than I have ever been. The House of Malfoy truly wishes to seek refuge with you and to serve you." Lynn said nothing for a long moment. He studied Lucius with an expression that read as level skepticism. "Keep spinning your story. I'm watching." A head of a pure-blood family suddenly prostrating itself before me, as if I were a puppet master? Lucius felt the scrutiny prick his skin. Sweat beaded at his temples. Realizing he needed evidence, he steeled himself and spoke the truth, and a little more besides. "I won't hide our motives. The House of Malfoy is acting out of self-preservation. You must know, the Dark Lord has returned." The words fell like a cold stone. Lucius's voice dipped. There was an instinctive recoil in it, though his eyes never left Lynn's. Lynn nodded once, almost as if to himself. If he's back, he's back. So what? Put up banners and trumpet fanfares in Diagon Alley? Not my circus. Lucius took that cool indifference as proof that Lynn could afford to ignore Voldemort. He pressed on, lowering his voice again. "The Dark Lord issued an order to us," he said. "He commanded, if possible, that you be made to serve him. He said some of your little talents might be interesting, but if you are stubborn or display dangerous tendencies that can't be controlled, we are ordered to eliminate you to prevent future trouble." Lucius felt as if a chill had soaked his back. He watched Lynn, waiting for a curse to fly across the table. Lynn's expression shifted through astonishment, amusement, outrage. "Really? You come to me with a job offer that includes a firing squad? You actually marched in here carrying a lantern to a latrine, or like someone who decides the only way to visit the god of longevity is to hang himself." Voldemort has narrowed his options. Excellent. He took a slow breath so Lucius could see he'd listened. "So," Lynn said, "you came to seek refuge because the Dark Lord ordered you to deal with me, and you realized you couldn't, so you defected? Sought refuge with the safer side?" Lucius flushed, but nodded. "The House of Malfoy just wants to survive. The Dark Lord's orders are dangerous and offer no benefit to the family. And you? I can see you are no ordinary person. Between the two choices, I chose what is better for my family." This time his honesty sounded genuine. Lynn rubbed his chin. He had no wish to be anyone's boss or to manage a retinue. It was tedious. "I understand, Mr. Malfoy. Thank you for telling me this. But our current arrangement is perfectly functional. You sell yours, I sell mine. Neither depends on the other. It's clean and efficient." Lucius looked disappointed. Lynn softened his tone slightly. "Of course, if, and I mean if, because of what you've told me today or some other catastrophic event, the House of Malfoy gets truly entangled and you find yourselves at the end of your rope, then I will do my best to help you find a way." The promise was hedged and vague, but it left a door open. It wasn't fealty or protection. It was a limited hand extended on the basis of existing commercial ties and the value of the information Lucius had provided. Lynn stood, signaling the meeting was over. Lucius rose quickly as well. He hadn't achieved the total dependency he'd hoped for, but the conditional aid was far better than the alternative. "I understand, Mr. Lynn. Thank you for your time. I wish you an enjoyable time watching the match. If there is any new information, I will find a way to let you know," Lucius said. Lynn nodded and made a small dismissive gesture. Lucius took his leave. Lynn sank back into his chair and turned his attention back to the match, the tent noise returning to the room now that the conversation had ended. 2-7. I want to die with you. The next evening, the sun's afterglow painted the camp's tents a warm, golden red. As the final approached, the atmosphere grew wildly excited. The camp buzzed louder by the minute. Alongside the fans, vendors were sprouting up everywhere, staking out the busiest spots. Around the general camp where the Weasleys were gathered was particularly crowded, with every kind of souvenir imaginable: glowing rose-shaped pins, Bulgarian and Irish scarves, binoculars printed with star players' faces that would shriek when you looked through them, and all manner of specialty snacks that smelled suspicious but somehow irresistible. Inside the relatively quiet VIP area, a different kind of hustle was happening in Lynn's tent. The twins were settling in for a profit-sharing meeting. "Lynn, you will not believe how much we made since yesterday." George flopped into the armchair opposite Lynn, cheeks flushed, grin wide. Fred squeezed in beside him, equally gleeful. Lynn stared at them, exasperated. "I'm not a seer or a spirit medium. How would I know how much your trial product sold for?" "Spirit medium?" The twins tilted their heads together. "Is that a new marketing gimmick?" Lynn waved a hand. "Think of it as an unexpectedly metaphysical form of market research." "Awesome," the twins chanted, then switched back to business. Fred produced a heavy cloth bag and dumped it onto the tea table with a satisfying clink. "Listen, mate," George said, rubbing his hands, eyes bright. "We followed that business plan you talked up for half an hour to a T. We set aside the startup galleons you gave us, then counted material costs, experimental spoilage, and the invisible venue fee for borrowing that patch of ground in the busiest part of the camp yesterday. He made a showy flourish. The manager's wife was paid off with a box of joke candies. She laughed so hard she passed out and didn't bother us. We deducted all sorts of expenses. He drew a breath. The rest. He yanked up the mouth of the bag, and with a metallic cascade, a mound of galleons, sickles, and nuts spilled onto the table, glittering like a small mountain. Is profit. From just over a day. Fred couldn't keep his voice steady with excitement. Lynn raised an eyebrow at the coins. It wasn't a fortune to him, but the speed and margin were impressive. The World Cup frenzy had been perfect fodder for the twins' creativity. Candies that colored tongues and smoked in team colors, brooches that let out the rival mascot's scream when worn, and fans had eaten it up. As agreed, split 50-50, George announced, already sorting the coins with almost comical rapidity. One for you, one for me. Well, Fred and I count as one side, so that's fair. They were midway through counting and brainstorming new novelty items when George suddenly snorted with laughter. Oh, you'll never guess who wandered by. Professor McGonagall. Fred imitated McGonagall's stern voice perfectly. We were in the middle of pitching green flame beard growth cream. One smear, and your beard takes on a roaring green flame look for an hour. To a group of Irish fans, when we looked up, and there she was. She had the Irish team colors plastered on her face. George flailed. Streaks of bright green on her forehead and cheeks. Fred and I nearly dropped the display. Merlin, we've never seen her in anything but black or gray robes, let alone face paint. She looked embarrassed, but her eyes were thrilled, Fred added. She even whispered if we had anything less flashy for Irish supporters. In the end, she bought a brooch that plays the Irish anthem and pinned it to her uniform. We hardly dared touch her galleons. Even Lynn had to laugh at the thought. It was a rare sight indeed. They were trading stories and divvying up the money when a light tapping came at the tent flap. Come in, Lynn called. Instead of the flap opening, the camp manager's voice came from outside. Good evening, Mr. Lynn. Apologies for the interruption. There are about 20 minutes until the final begins, and this is the last call for spectator entry. The ministry suggests people get in early to avoid missing the opening ceremony. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Edolf, Lynn called back. Enjoy the match. The footsteps faded. 20 minutes. Edgar sprang up. Let's go, let's go. I don't want to miss a single bit. The twins shoved the coins back into their bag with practiced speed. Watching the final came first. They straightened clothes, grabbed tickets, and poured out into the crowd. The road to the stadium was already packed. Not far on, they ran into Arthur Weasley and Amos Diggory, both scanning the crowd anxiously. Thank goodness, there you are, Mr. Weasley said with relief. He was with the rest of the family. Harry, Hermione, Cedric, Cho, everyone ready to go. If we hadn't found you, I was going to have Percy use the ministry channel to broadcast a message. They're about to close the gates. A distant gong confirmed it. Instantly, thousands of enchanted lamps along the road winked on, lighting the way. The crowd moved shoulder to shoulder toward the stadium, and Mr. Diggory, pride in his voice, called out to the younger spectators as if giving a tour. This stadium uses space extension charms and composite reinforcement. It can hold hundreds of thousands of people. The ministry employed over 500 staff for the design and construction, an entire year's work. It's a miracle of magical engineering. People around him murmured and nodded. At the entrance, dozens of gates funneled the crowd into long lines. Ministry officials checked tickets breathlessly, barking orders. Lynn and his group queued with the Weasleys, surrounded by a jumble of languages, shouts, and the fading calls of vendors. After about 10 minutes, it was their turn. Mr. Weasley handed over a stack of tickets, and the gatekeeper scanned them. Weasley, Diggory, Potter, Granger, Chang, top box, general seating, west section, row 199, up the stairs to the very top. Our tickets are at the very top, Mr. Weasley said to Lynn. What about yours? Lynn pulled out his 4 gilded tickets stamped in fine gold print. Box 7, luxury box. Luxury box. Ron's face lit with envy. Looks like we won't be watching together. George put on an exaggerated pout. Box 7, I hate rich people, especially young, successful, and decent-looking rich people. Fred agreed with a theatrical sigh. Lynn only smiled. He didn't begrudge them. The box promised a different experience. Enjoy the sweeping view, he said. Try not to get too excited and fall over the rail. See ya. The group split up, each swept along different paths. Lynn and his three companions, Edgar, William, and Ollie, followed a red-carpeted fast lane marked VIP and box access. There were far fewer people. They climbed a few flights of carpeted stairs and arrived at the door marked 7. Inside was roomier than anyone expected. Gilded armchairs faced a wide, open viewing platform with an unobstructed sightline over the bowl of the stadium. Small tea tables held the ministry's VIP snacks, delicate magical candies, bottles of shimmering drinks, and napkins stamped with the ministry seal. Lynn popped a golden snitch-shaped candy into his mouth and chewed twice. The flavor was baffling, overly sweet with a medicinal tang like eucalyptus. He spit it into a napkin. Somebody's budget went weird, he muttered. Edgar, William, and Ollie rushed to the platform edge to look down. The stadium was breathtaking, a bowl of tens of thousands of seats packed with people, and below, the Quidditch pitch glimmered with empty goalposts under bright lights. A massive screen near the stands loomed above the crowd. Its clarity and size made everything else look small. Its frame flashed the Epoch Alchemy logo. But instead of team introductions or ads, the screen was running a sequence of bizarre commercials Lynn had arranged. The first cut, rapid shots of Diagon Alley shop windows, footage of the 28 broomsticks speeding past, and flashy close-ups of alchemical wares, all overlaid with a breathless voice, part rant, part blare, shouting in a rapid jumble of languages. London, Epoch Alchemy has gone bankrupt. The owner spent $350 million on feasting, gambling, and fled with his sister-in-law. The second was worse. A sad-looking doo-doo, the shop mascot, peered into camera, holding up an alchemical device, and droned in a flat voice, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? If you're okay, come to Epoch Alchemy." Edgar, William, and Ollie watched, slack-jawed. What kind of cursed advertising was this? Then the third clip played, shaky, clearly filmed covertly. It cut to a morning scene in the Hogwarts Great Hall, Edgar happily eating breakfast. A voice, hilariously impersonating his mother, piped through. "Attention, please. Student Edgar Burns of Hufflepuff. Your mother has brought 2 of your favorite alchemical devices and is at the school entrance to find you. Student Edgar, please come to the entrance hall immediately. Your mother waits." The screen froze on a close-up of Edgar choking in mid-bite, his face blown up and magnified for tens of thousands of spectators. The novelty drained out of Edgar's expression in a second. His eyes went huge and glassy. He turned toward Lynn, pointing with a trembling finger. "Lynn, you bastard! When did you film that? And you put it on that giant screen. The whole school, no, the whole wizarding world is going to see this. My face." Lynn took a calm sip of his drink and gave Edgar an innocent grin. How's the advertising effect? Very memorable. Everyone will remember Student Edgar from Hogwarts. Think of the exposure. Might even help your chances with someone special. "I'll help your chances by smashing your head in." Edgar lunged. William and Ollie grabbed his waist and arm, stifling laughter while holding him back from tackling Lynn. "Let go. I'm taking him down with me." "Calm down, Edgar. The match is starting," someone hissed, but the final roar of the crowd was already building as the stadium prepared for kickoff. P.S. I originally planned to post a double-length chapter, but the word count didn't make it. There'll be another chapter at midnight. If you enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star review. Oars. The last few empty gilded chairs filled up over the next few minutes as more spectators arrived. Most of them were immaculately dressed, radiating the reserved, detached air typical of the wizarding elite. They nodded politely to one another and murmured low-voiced predictions and wagers. "Please come in." A voice trying hard to sound respectful came from the door. Lynn turned and recognized the speaker. Percy, his red hair impeccably groomed, was pushing open the box door and making a formal little after-you gesture down the corridor. "Percy?" Lynn called. At the sound of his name, Percy snapped his head around, shock clear on his face. He hadn't expected to find an acquaintance in the box. He tried to compose himself into a professional expression, but his surprise showed. A deep, authoritative voice from the doorway interrupted his embarrassment. "Who is calling you?" A man with a face so stern and rigid it bordered on severe entered. "Mr. Crouch." Percy straightened immediately, his expression suddenly respectful. It's an old classmate from Hogwarts. I didn't expect him to be here. He turned and gestured toward Lynn. Mr. Crouch's gaze swept across the box. Ah, Mr. Lynn, a pleasure. A pleasure, Mr. Crouch, Lynn replied with a nod. Curiosity got the better of him. Why aren't you in the minister's box, Mr. Crouch? I assumed you'd be up there. The question was blunt. For a beat, Crouch looked taken aback. Percy, a half step behind him, sensed his superior's momentary embarrassment and stepped forward to answer in his stead. Mr. Crouch is here for security reasons, Percy announced with vigorous conviction, as if he'd rehearsed the line. He said the view here is broader and closer to the general crowd. In case anyone tries to cause trouble, he can spot it earlier and react in time. Percy sounded so certain he almost believed it. Lynn nodded and let the matter drop. I see. Mr. Crouch is very dedicated. Edgar, sitting beside Lynn, reached over and nudged his thigh. He leaned in and whispered in a low voice for only the two of them. Wasn't Crouch once head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement? Now he's been moved to the Department of International Magical Cooperation, right? Security's the Auror's job, or the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. Why is he doing the Auror's work? And broader view? Edgar normally spoke without much filter, but with ministry parents, he'd learned a thing or two about the departments. Lynn lowered his voice in reply. Maybe. He just prefers this vantage point. Who are we, little people, to guess what high officials are thinking? They murmured like that for a moment when a cough, amplified by a charm, rang out across the stadium. The sound cut through the buzz of conversation, and all eyes turned upward. Lights converged on a floating platform high above the center of the pitch. Ludo Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, stood there and beamed. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. A thunderous roar of cheering, whistles, and stamping feet rose up like a wave, making the stadium itself seem to vibrate. Bagman let the applause wash over him for a few seconds before spreading his arms to call for quiet. Before the excitement begins, allow me to introduce, first to appear, the mascots of the Bulgarian national team. Exotic, misty music, like something from a moonlit lakeside or deep forest, swelled from hidden speakers. William leaned forward over the railing, curiosity bright in his eyes. I wonder what their mascot will be. His curiosity evaporated the instant he glimpsed the pitch entrance. The expression on his face froze in awe. Edgar and Ollie reacted the same way. In the box, except for Lynn and Mr. Crouch, almost every male spectator's face changed in an instant. A few of them giggled like schoolboys, mouths slack, eyes fixed on the pitch as something incredibly beautiful floated in. A group of creatures drifted onto the field, pearlescent skin, long silver hair that moved as if stirred by an unseen breeze, faces so impossibly lovely they seemed almost inhuman. They danced with ethereal grace. Every spin and glance carried an unmistakable enchantment. Vila. Lynn raised an eyebrow and looked at his three friends, who had turned into instant fanboys. He reached into his pocket without hurry, pulled out 3 ordinary-looking glasses, and then a small camera. Click. He snapped a clear close-up of the faces in front of him, capturing the ridiculous, blissful expressions on Edgar, William, and Ollie. Then he pocketed the camera and rubbed his right index finger and thumb together. A tiny, crackling current of electricity leapt to his fingertips. Seeing the moment, he flicked the back of each of their heads, quick, precise taps with just enough force to daze them briefly, but not hurt them. Ouch! Hiss! Who hit me? They all cried out and grabbed the backs of their heads. The spell that had held them lifted, their eyes cleared, and color rushed into their faces as reality returned. When they saw the camera in Lynn's hand and remembered what had happened, their cheeks flamed crimson. Edgar wished he could dig a passage through the carpet straight back to Hogwarts. Put these on, Lynn said, jamming the 3 pairs of glasses into their hands. They'll help you keep your head. They slipped the glasses on hastily. The flush faded a little. Fortunately, they weren't the only ones who'd made fools of themselves. Several other men in the box still wore the dazed looks to varying degrees. The Vila finished their dance, gave a polite nod to the crowd, and drifted away like mist. The audience awoke from their dream and exploded into applause and cheering. Bagman's voice rose again. Now, please raise your scarves and give a warm welcome to the mascots of the Irish national team. Something like a comet screamed into the stadium, whistling as it whirled around the pitch. A shower of golden coins fell from the sky, sending children and adults alike scrambling to catch the glittering pieces. Lynn squinted up. The comet's body was actually made of dozens upon dozens of palm-sized leprechauns, all wearing bright red vests and sporting curled mustaches. Each carried a little gold or green lantern. They flew together in tight formation, smart, coordinated, and mischievous. After circling the center a few times, they surged upward and scattered, forming a colossal shamrock in the sky as gold coins rained down. The crowd roared. The leprechauns laughed in unison, then flitted over to the stands where the Irish fans were gathered and perched to enjoy the match, teasing the Bulgarians below. "Now!" Bagman cried, his voice peaking with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, give all your passion, sharpen your eyes. A warm welcome to the brave players of the Bulgarian and Irish national teams entering the field." Boom, an unprecedented wave of sound erupted. The stadium took the cheer and sent it back 100-fold. "Look, it's Krum! Victor Krum!" someone shouted. "And Dimitrov, Bulgaria's star." Players in deep red and bright green robes streaked across the sky on their brooms, circling and weaving, waving to the stands. Each name Bagman called unleashed a tidal roar from the relevant corner of the stadium. Cornelius Fudge took over the platform from Bagman, feeling that such a grand spectacle demanded his presence. He stepped forward, smiling for the cameras. "As British Minister for Magic, I am delighted to welcome you all to the 422nd Quidditch World Cup Final." He raised a hand, then declared, "I now declare the final to be begun." Amidst cheers so loud they seemed about to tear the roof off, the chairman of the International Quidditch Federation, also the head referee for the final, a short, elderly wizard, strode to the center of the pitch carrying the crate with the match balls. He raised his small silver wand and pointed it at the crate. "Look, they're off!" Ludo Bagman's commentary exploded through the stadium, igniting the crowd even further. The crate opened, and the quaffle, the bludgers, and the golden snitch shot out with a hum. Almost at the same moment, the 14 players from both sides blasted out of their halves. The professional players' speed was dazzling, far beyond anything seen in a Hogwarts house cup. The quaffle was passed between the three Irish chasers like a juggling act, their formation shifting unpredictably. The three charged toward the Bulgarian goalposts with incredible coordination and speed. "My goodness, so fast!" Bagman, already breathless from the opening momentum, gave up calling names and began narrating tactics instead. A classic hawkshed attacking formation. The Bulgarian keeper must be completely confused. Which one do you block? Left, right, middle? The Porskov ploy. Look at the one in the middle. He feints and draws the Bulgarian beaters away. The ball goes out to the left wing. The shot! He scores. Bagman's voice cracked with excitement. Levski, well done. Less than a minute into the match. The Irish take the lead. 10 points to 0. Ireland up. The stadium erupted and the Irish supporters waved flags frantically. Badass! Even usually composed, William slapped his thigh and let out a rare exclamation. He then frowned, leaning forward and zeroing in on the bludgers buzzing between players. Have you noticed? The bludgers this World Cup seem faster than before. Ollie, waving a small green flag, peered and nodded. A little, yeah. Lynn reclined in his chair, explaining casually, "They're probably match balls specially modified to keep up with broom performance. Since high-speed brooms like my 280 and the Firebolt appeared, players' top speeds have climbed. If they used the old bludger models, they wouldn't catch the players, let alone pose a real threat." So that's it. William absorbed that and returned his attention to the game. Beautiful. Another precise long pass. The Irish score again. 60-0. Bagman's commentary struggled to keep up with the pace. The Irish attack became a torrent. They scored 5 more goals in quick succession. The scoreboard jumped wildly. The Bulgarians, already stunned by the opening surprise, were suppressed. Their goal was constantly under threat. The numbers on the scoreboard rose rapidly to 150-10 after the Irish added yet another goal. The Bulgarian fans fell into anxious silence. Seeing their team in trouble, the Bulgarian mascots could no longer sit still and began a crude form of off-field interference. The music started again, but this time with an odd, bewitching power. The Vila were no longer merely dancing gracefully. A strange light flickered in their eyes as they tried to directly distract the Irish players. It was underhanded and insidious. An Irish chaser advancing with the quaffle had his focus stolen by the song coming from the side stands. Heh, Bo, beautiful. His eyes glazed, his hand loosened on the broom handle. With a foolish smile, he craned his neck toward the Vila, forgetting the match and the quaffle entirely. The broom lurched, taking the daydreaming player toward the ground. "Oh no," the Irish supporters cried. Fortunately, the broom's obstacle avoidance kicked in. The tip tilted up just in time, and the broom hovered inches above the turf, averting a nasty fall. The player was dazed by the sudden drop and stop, and the quaffle had long since fallen somewhere below. "Shameless! That's cheating," the Irish fans roared. The mascots were enraged. "How dare they use dirty tricks on the match? Smash them!" the lead leprechaun shrieked. The gold coins in their hands condensed into heavy lumps of metal, which they hurled at the Vila. "Ouch! My head!" Despicable green bugs. The metal lumps struck shoulders and heads. They didn't seriously injure the Vila, but left swelling bumps and screams of pain. Furious, the Vila gathered bright fireballs and flung them at the leprechauns. The leprechauns dodged nimbly and retaliated with condensed gold, taunting them loudly. For a moment, the stands dissolved into chaos, fireballs and gold coins arcing across the air. Spectators, stunned at first, then erupted into even louder cheers and whistles. "Good fight! Show them what leprechauns are made of! Vila, burn them!" A Quidditch match and a stunt-packed mascot war for the price of one ticket. The crowd loved it. Players on the field were briefly distracted. The referee urgently dispatched stewards who waved their wands and produced loud bangs to break up the melee, finally separating the red-eyed mascots and ordering them to behave. About an hour into the volatile match, both teams' seekers suddenly narrowed their eyes, locking onto a corner of the pitch. At that moment, the scoreboard read 170-10, Ireland well in the lead. "The snitch! Both seekers have spotted it!" Bagman's voice rose. Crumb wasted no time. His large, powerful body erupted with surprising agility as he jerked his broom into a near-vertical plunge, diving headlong toward where the snitch might appear. The Irish seeker, O'Hare, was a split second behind, but followed at full speed. The two men streaked through the air in a breathtaking chase, sometimes skimming the ground, sometimes threading through the heads of spectators. The whole stadium held its breath. During an extremely dangerous low dive, just as the tail of Crumb's broom nearly grazed the turf, his arm shot out. Snap! Crumb jerked his broom up and slowly rose, holding the small golden ball, its wings still fluttering between his fingers. "Crumb has caught the golden snitch. The match is over," Ludo Bagman bellowed. For a moment there was stunned silence, then an eruption of sound. Crumb had caught the snitch, but Bulgaria had still lost by 10 points. The scoreboard froze. Bulgaria, 160 points. Ireland, 170 points. The Bulgarians cheered at the snitch catch, but the Irish supporters roared their victory. The final whistle and the roar echoed around the stadium. 210. We have already taken action. By the time Lynn and the other three finally squeezed out of the stadium with the dispersing crowd and returned to the vicinity of the campsite, the sky was pitch black. Fatigue made no dent in the elation of victory. The camp had become one enormous open-air party. Tents glittered with magical lanterns and flickering lights. The air was thick with the sense of beer, too, and grilled meat. The Irish team's anthem, the Bulgarian team's lament, and countless out-of-tune voices blended and echoed under the stars. Groups of wizards waved flags, and now and then, someone fired green or red magical fireworks that bloomed into shamrocks or dragons, earning bursts of cheers. Amid the revelry, though, a small group stood out for the wrong reason: George and Fred. The twins weren't celebrating or going back to their tent. They were prowling the camp, brows tightly furrowed, faces set in angry lines. They stopped repeatedly, shook their heads like maracas, scanned every blade of grass at their feet, the shadows beneath bushes, even the corners of nearby tents. "You two wakeful and not celebrating. What are you looking for?" Lynn's voice came from behind them, laced with obvious puzzlement. The twins froze mid-scan. When they turned and saw Lynn, the anger on their faces melted into embarrassment. "That! Lynn, hi! Evening," George managed, a smile that looked worse than a grimace. No, nothing. We're just walking off dinner. Yes, walking off dinner. The air here is lovely. Exactly, Fred agreed, nodding too quickly and letting his gaze wander. Stargazing, a stroll. The green fireworks are pretty, right? Lynn crossed his arms and sized them up. Guilty conscience was practically stamped across both their faces. Walking off dinner? A stroll? You don't look like you're enjoying the peace of the night. You look more like you've done something bad and are trying to destroy the evidence. The twins both shot up, voices going an octave higher. How is that possible? How could we do anything to wrong you? Lynn, what kind of people do you take us for? Their outraged reaction was practically a confession in itself. Lynn blinked. It involves me too? The twins exchanged glances and let their shoulders slump. Fred scratched his head and barreled into an explanation at breakneck speed. Listen, it's like this. We made some galleons selling souvenirs, right? Then, Bagman, he said he had a little betting pool. We made it. So for the match, we invested the profits a bit. And we won, George whispered from the side. Bagman was blunt about it, gave us a huge bag of galleons on the spot. It was heavy. Lynn listened without expression. So you used the money we made selling merchandise to bet on the match, and you actually won. The twins nodded like birds pecking at seed. Fred, suddenly mournful, kept talking. Yeah, we won. We thought we'd make a big profit and surprise you, give you back your capital plus more. But when we got back and wanted to count it, we opened the bag and saw Merlin's fattest underpants. The glittering galleons were all those leprechaun-conjured coins. George slammed his fist down and kicked at the turf as if he could dig the lost money back up. That liar, he stuffed a sack full of fake coins and cheated us out of our real galleons. We're penniless again. We've even lost our capital. Lynn was quiet for a few seconds after they finished. That's it? The twins looked at him, bewildered. Lynn shrugged. Consider it an early investment in your future joke shop. Fred and George exchanged looks of outrage and grief. Even so, Fred clenched a fist. We can't swallow this insult. Right, George agreed. We have to look. Even if we can't find the real galleons, we have to find something. We can't just let it go. Night deepened. Outside the tent, revelry had only faded at the edges. The fireworks still whistled occasionally, and much of the camp planned to celebrate till dawn. All that noise, however, held no meaning for Lynn at that moment. He had just received a short message from Lucius Malfoy. We've made our move. Target, you. Be careful. The Death Eaters had started to move. They were coming for him, true to their orders to recruit or eliminate. With the Quidditch World Cup final over and Ministry security most lax, the mixed crowds were the perfect cover. Lynn had already transformed into an inconspicuous beetle and crouched on the tent carpet. The beetle vibrated its wings and slipped out through a gap in the flap, melting into the darkness that fringed the campsite. He wandered aimlessly among shadows, grass, and tent seams. The compound eyes gave him nearly 360-degree vision. His tiny size and natural camouflage made him almost invisible. As he scuttled, Lynn muttered to himself, annoyed. Death Eaters, so inefficient. Or did they get lost? Lucius said they'd moved. It's been a while. So why haven't I seen a soul? Then the very thing he spoke of appeared. Figures detached themselves from the blackness at the camp's edge. 7 or 8 people in uniform black hooded robes, hoods low, faces masked with slits for eyes and mouths. A slightly tall, thin figure walked a little ahead of the others, clearly leading. Lucius Malfoy. A thick-set Death Eater in the group, impatience audible in his stride, quickened to catch up and snapped. Malfoy, how much longer till we reach that brat's camp? It's pitch black. Are you sure you didn't take a wrong turn? Lucius stopped and turned slowly. What's the rush? We're almost there, he said, then added in a low voice. And why are you shouting? Do you want the whole camp to know we're here? Do you think looking like this we can just barge in? The thick-set man went silent, stung. He wanted to retort, you weren't exactly whispering yourself, but swallowed it and fell back, scowling. Lucius ignored the grumbling and pushed forward, though his calm exterior didn't match the thoughts behind it. Lynn should have received the warning by now. Why was there no reaction? This. A blinding flash exploded without warning less than 3 feet in front of him. The light was so intense it filled the eye holes of his mask, leaving nothing but searing white. Crack! A thunderous roar followed, not from the sky but from right beside him, making Lucius's ears ring. Before he could react, before he could raise his wand or utter the shield charm, something whistled past, grazing the skin of his cheek. Ugh! A short scream came from behind him. Instincts honed by years of fear made Lucius spin. He saw the Death Eater who had been berating him only moments before, standing rigid, wand half raised. Smoke billowed from his black robes. The eyes behind his mask were blown wide with terror. Dozens of blue-white electric snakes crackled and leapt across his body. In the next heartbeat, he pitched forward and hit the ground with a heavy thud. A burnt stench filled the clearing. The body was smoldering charcoal, utterly still. Killed in one strike. Lucius hadn't even seen where the attack came from. "Who's there? Come out!" The remaining Death Eaters were already terrified. Like a flock of startled birds, they scattered, each seeking cover. Their wands pointed in every direction, tips trembling with light as they scanned every shadow and rustling bush. The assault did not stop. Just as their nerves reached breaking point, rumble! It wasn't thunder, but a roaring torrent, a concentrated column of water, like a high-pressure cannon, appearing out of the night sky and crashing onto a Death Eater who had been leaning against a tree, staring upward. He recoiled, instincts screaming to roll aside, but his legs seemed rooted as if knotted by waterweed. No! He could only raise his wand in desperation to block the oncoming deluge. The expected crushing impact never came. The solid column shattered in midair a few feet above his head. Then countless droplets fell, dense as a downpour, spreading over the center of the clearing and those trying to hide at the edges. The droplets struck soil, leaves, and black robes with a hiss, a corrosive sizzle like acid eating through matter. The ground smoked and blistered where they landed. Leaves withered and blackened. The drops burned through fabric and into flesh. Ah, my arm! This water, it's wrong! A curse. The water's cursed. Shrill cries rose. The water hadn't crushed them, but it left gashes and searing pain. Formation and discipline collapsed. In the chaos, one Death Eater's resolve shattered. No punishment from the master would make him stay where he might die like this. Clutching an arm riddled with smoking holes, he frantically waved his wand, lips shaping the syllables of apparition. Before the spell could leave his mouth, a voice without emotion drifted from the deepest shadow at the clearing's edge. Crucio! A blinding crimson beam shot out, faster than any ordinary jinx, plunging into the back of the Death Eater who had tried to flee. Ah! Ah! Pure, soul-rending agony erupted, far worse than corrosion, tearing through him. His attempted apparition failed. His body arched, he howled, and collapsed twitching. Then something impossible happened. The moment the first Crucio struck, bang, 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 bang. As if a chain reaction had been triggered, that crimson light split, refracted, and leapt. Like a string of living lightning, it surged through the Death Eaters who had been soaked by the corrosive droplets, each one still bearing the marks of the curse. Those linked in the chain convulsed, screamed, and fell in a cascade of agony. In the middle of the clearing, only Lucius Malfoy remained upright. He had not been touched by the raindrops. He had not been connected by the Crucio. He stood frozen, his wand dropped, eyes wide behind his mask, staring at his comrades writhing on the ground and then toward the shadow that had released the crimson beam. Tap, tap, footsteps sounded from the darkness. A figure stepped forward calmly. Lynn. He had returned to his original appearance, young, composed. Lucius looked at him, mind a blank. He pointed at the tortured Death Eaters, then at Lynn, his finger trembling. What kind of Crucio is this? How can it split like that? Lucius had seen the Dark Lord's power and many strange dark arts, yet even he had never imagined an attack like this. As a certain noseless Dark Lord might have said, "You haven't seen a killing curse fork." Lynn's gaze swept over the moaning bodies. He clicked his tongue, as if surprised no one had come to finish them off. Avada Kedavra! A series of green lights flashed. The Death Eaters' suffering ended as their lives were taken in an instant. Lucius stared, speechless. "Good evening, Mr. Malfoy," Lynn said. "I simply dealt with some noise. I hope I didn't startle you, and thank you. Your information was very timely." Lucius swallowed hard. "Good evening, Mr. Lynn. You're welcome. It's what I should do. Oh, by the way." Lynn reached into his pocket, rummaged, and produced a small object. He held out his hand. A ring lay in his palm, made of a dull, silvery metal, not flashy but exquisitely crafted. The face was carved into a coiled snake, head slightly raised. The scales were finely detailed, and two tiny dark gems set for eyes caught faint glimmers in the dim light. Lucius stared. "This is a small present," Lynn said, "a perk for a partner and for your safety." He explained, "The ring's main function is to passively detect and defend against legilimency. When someone tries to probe your mind, the ring triggers. It won't violently block or reflect the intruder's magic. That would be too obvious and arouse suspicion. Instead, you can pre-store certain memories or thoughts inside. Your outward loyalty to the Dark Lord, anxiousness about completing a task, fragments that will make you appear trustworthy without revealing your true intentions. When legilimency occurs, the ring projects these preset contents to cover your real mental activity. It's smart. It adjusts what it shows to match the intensity of the intrusion so it appears natural." There was one thing Lynn didn't say. It wouldn't fool him. He could read whatever he pleased. Lucius didn't hesitate. He slipped the ring onto his finger. The cold metal settled against his skin, and for the first time that night, he felt a measure of security. The ring even adjusted its size for a perfect fit. He looked at the snake ring, then at Lynn. "Mr. Lynn, this gift is too valuable. I don't know how to thank you." Lynn waved him off. "We're partners. We help each other. Your safety is good for our future. Business." Lucius resolved then and there that, for as long as the Dark Lord lived, he would not take that ring off for a single day. "This is an order. This is an order." Just as Lynn was explaining the marvels of that ring to Lucius Malfoy in painstaking detail, the Weasley tent at the nearby campsite was brightly lit, but it felt strangely empty. Only Arthur Weasley and Barty Crouch sat opposite one another, a half-eaten plate still on the table between them. The rest of the Weasleys, along with Harry, Hermione, and Edgar, had gone off to join the post-victory celebrations at the center of camp, leaving the tent unusually quiet. Arthur watched Crouch, who had sat ramrod straight since entering, staring into space and saying nothing. He was unnerved. Why would his former superior come alone at this hour just to sit like this? "Mr. Crouch?" Arthur tried, breaking the silence gently. "It's very late. Has something happened? Is there an urgent notice from the ministry?" Crouch shifted, the movement slight. He blinked slowly and fixed Arthur with a hollow look. Inside his head, everything felt scrambled, a tangle of conflicting instructions. But one command rose above the rest. He had to find Harry Potter and take him to the Gaunt House area. His voice was dry when he spoke. "Sorry to disturb you so late, Arthur. There is urgent official business at the ministry that requires Harry Potter's cooperation in an investigation. I've been sent to take him now." "The ministry? Urgent business? Looking for Harry?" Arthur frowned. What kind of business needs an underage student in the middle of the night at the World Cup campsite? Even if it's urgent, there are procedures. Guardians are notified. Aurors handle these things. Why would you come personally? He leaned forward. "Mr. Crouch, what exactly is going on? Can you be more specific?" The question seemed to hit a blank in Crouch's mind. He froze, eyes vacant, lips twitching as though a rusted mechanism were trying to process a command it no longer understood. After a long, mechanical silence, Arthur waved a hand in front of him, trying to rouse him. "Mr. Crouch, are you all right? Do you need to rest?" That did something. Crouch snapped back, as if awakened. "Arthur, this is an order, not a notice. I do not need to explain the details. Hand over Harry Potter immediately." The sudden shout startled Arthur, but he stood his ground. "Mr. Crouch, even an order from the ministry has to follow basic procedure and respect a minor's rights. Harry is exhausted. Without paperwork or an Auror escort, I can't let you take him. At the very least, tell me what department this is from, what the matter is, and show me authorization." "Move aside, Arthur. I'm taking him now." Crouch's impatience snapped. He pushed himself up and moved around the table toward the inner part of the tent. "Mr. Crouch, please calm down. You can't do this." Arthur stepped forward to block him. Crouch's patience shattered. His eyes flashed, and with terrifying speed he drew his wand from his sleeve. Without hesitating, he aimed it at Arthur. Stupefy! A jet of magic exploded from the tip of Crouch's wand. Arthur didn't expect such betrayal from his former superior. There was no time to dodge. The spell struck him in the chest. He choked, his eyes going glassy, and then his body went limp, collapsing onto the tent carpet, unconscious. Edgar, who had just come into the tent intending to relieve himself, froze as if struck. The urge vanished completely. He stared at the scene, Crouch raising his wand, Arthur lying motionless, and his heart slammed against his ribs. Only one thought burned through his head. Something's happened. Crouch attacked Mr. Weasley. I have to call for help. He turned to run toward the center of camp. Crouch saw the movement immediately. Brat! He barked, whipping his head around and locking on Edgar. The wand turned with him. Tell me where Harry Potter is, or I'll give you the same fate as Weasley. Edgar panicked and bolted for the tent flap. Crouch didn't hesitate. Incarcerus! Ropes of conjured binding magic shot for Edgar's back. At the last instant, a palm-sized metal plate in his left pocket flared searing hot. Complex miniature runes lit across its surface. A faint, translucent shield blossomed around him, shimmering into being and wrapping him tight. The binding curse thudded against the ward with a dull impact. Light scattered, but could not penetrate the strange, thin-seeming barrier. The shield wavered, dimmed a little, but held. Crouch's eyes blazed. He hadn't expected the boy to carry protective charms. His intent was simple and brutal now. Clear the obstacles and take the target. He raised his wand again, preparing to unleash a far stronger blast, enough to shatter the shield. At that moment, without any warning, a little cluster of gold-red flames appeared behind Edgar. The fire flashed and vanished in an instant, and a figure stepped out of it like a ghost. Lynn's gaze swept in one rapid sweep over the scene. The fallen Arthur, pale-faced Edgar trapped in the barrier, and Barty Crouch with his wand raised. He had the whole situation assessed in a heartbeat. This man needed to be stopped. Lynn didn't hesitate or speak. He raised his hand, and his voice cut through the tent like ice. Cruciatus! A scarlet beam of light ripped through the air inside the tent and struck old Barty Crouch in the chest just as he was raising his wand. Ah! The agony of the Cruciatus curse tore through him. The pain dug into his marrow and clawed at his soul, drowning out every other sensation. The arm holding the wand convulsed, and the wand clattered from his hand. His body shook violently before he pitched forward, collapsing hard onto the carpet. Lynn watched Crouch roll in agony without expression, then gave his wand a casual flick. A coil of spare canvas rope in the corner of the tent snapped into several chains that wound around Crouch's wrists, ankles, and torso with a metallic clink. He was bound tight, able only to turn his head a fraction. Lynn stepped forward, stopping a few paces away. Mr. Crouch, he said, voice smooth, I imagine the taste of the Crucio should remind you what it's like. Are you feeling more awake now? Do you remember who you are and what you were attempting a moment ago? Crouch's body still trembled, but a thread of awareness had returned. He nodded with effort. Lynn believed him, or at least pretended to. Legilimency. Invisible strands of magic slipped into Crouch's mind. Endure. Play along. Wait for a chance. Get him back when his guard is down. Lynn listened to the thoughts racing beneath the surface. He tilted his head. Mr. Crouch, this is unfortunate. I don't want to treat a respected head of department this way, but the Imperio is more resilient than I expected. Your recovery isn't complete. Before the words had fully left his mouth, Lynn raised his wand again. Cruciatus. Another merciless beam hit the bound Crouch, who couldn't move to evade it. Ah! No, don't! I was wrong! Ah! The scream was longer this time. The pain went deeper. When Crouch's eyes reopened, all that remained was the exhausted vacancy that follows prolonged torture. It took several seconds for focus to reassemble in those blank eyes. Lynn probed again with legilimency. The thought of betraying Lynn had vanished, replaced by terror over what had just happened. Lynn's expression shifted to exaggerated concern. Oh my, Mr. Crouch. He took a step closer, apology oozing from his tone. You're finally awake. You didn't actually see anything, did you? Crouch closed his eyes, biting back as memory tried to surface. When he opened them, he looked at Lynn differently. Yes, I broke free on my own. The rest, I can't remember clearly. That's wonderful, Lynn said, relief painted on his face. Damn it, there's still awareness after Imperio. The books say nothing about that. He flicked his wand, and Crouch's head lolled as he slipped into a deep sleep. Lynn traced a complex pattern in the air. Magic seeped into Crouch's sleeping mind. meticulously weaving, erasing, and overwriting. He erased the parts of Crouch's memory that involved using the Cruciatus and Legilimency, replacing them with a plausible script in which Mr. Crouch fought the Imperio with tremendous willpower and finally broke free by force. Why the pain afterward? Who could say? Satisfied, Lynn unshackled him and arranged him in as comfortable a position as the carpet allowed. He crossed to Arthur Weasley to check on him. Old Barty's stupefy had hit Arthur hard, but he should be fine. Lynn cast a small waking charm to ensure Arthur would rouse naturally. When that was done, he exhaled softly and returned to his usual casual tone. All right, that's done. Edgar, let's go back to our tent. It's best to let Mr. Crouch and Mr. Weasley wake up on their own. Edgar blinked and lowered the protective shield. He stood, a little sheepish. I'm going to the loo first. I've been holding it in forever. Lynn watched them go. Then the tent settled into silence. Time passed. Arthur's eyelids twitched. He opened his eyes slowly, puzzled for a second. How had he fallen asleep on the carpet? And so deeply? He stretched. His joints popped pleasantly. The rest had been unexpectedly sweet. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, vision a little blurry, and scanned the tent. He spotted another figure on the carpet not far away. Barty Crouch. The last moments before losing consciousness crashed back into him, and confusion became white-hot fury. You piece of work, Barty Crouch! Arthur's gentle features flushed red. He sprang to his feet, rolled his sleeves up, and stalked toward Crouch. Fresh anger at being knocked out, and old grudges at Crouch's usual arrogance swelled together until his blood roared in his ears. To hell with your department head title. To hell with your orders. Arthur cursed, and he put all his strength into a kick aimed squarely at Crouch's side. The blow landed with a solid thud. The sleeping man arched, emitting a strangled groan as he was jarred awake. Crouch's eyes snapped open. His head foggy, his body aching, he blinked and met Arthur's furious gaze and his retracted foot. Pain and confusion crashed through him. What happened? Where am I? Why does my whole body hurt? Why is Arthur Weasley kicking me? Memories burst past whatever barrier had been left and rushed back into his mind. Arthur, wait, let me explain. Crouch forced himself upright despite the pain. It's not what you think. I was. Arthur wasn't listening. Explain? What's there to explain? Stupefying a colleague and trying to seize a child. Is that something you can just explain away? His gaze flicked to a nearby folding camping stool of aluminum. It wasn't heavy, but it was sturdy. Without a word, Arthur snatched it up and under Crouch's terrified stare raised it high. Bang! Crouch screamed. Arthur, stop! This is an order. I am the head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. You can't attack a superior. Hearing order only poured more fuel on Arthur's anger. To hell with your orders. Bang, bang! Ah, Arthur, you're crazy. Stop. I can pretend this never happened. Ow! Explain? Orders? I'll give you explain. I'll give you orders. 214. Car accident time flowed as usual, and once again it was the start of the school year at Hogwarts. London had that thin chill and restless bustle of early autumn. Outside King's Cross Station, the crowds wove together like a tapestry. At the boundary between the magical and the mundane, it was as busy as ever. A sleek car, its paint catching the autumn sun in a muted gleam, slid to a stop at a relatively quiet curb near the station. In the driver's seat, Dudu released the steering wheel and, breaking the silence inside the car, spoke in its gentle, teasing voice. Master, we've arrived at the station. Dudu reminds you it's time to get out. If you want to continue that beautiful dream of catching big fish, I suggest you wait until you're in your dormitory bed at Hogwarts. Less chance of catching a cold that way. In the back seat, Lynn, eyes closed and dozing, was immediately jarred awake by Dudu's words. He jabbed a finger at the air in mock indignation. Have I never caught one before? He shot back. If you mean a bunch of small fish, not even as big as your palm, then just forget you said anything. He opened the door with a disgruntled snort and stepped out. Before he could take a breath, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. Beep, beep! A car horn screamed. Lynn turned and saw a dark blue sedan hurtling toward the intersection where he stood, sparks trailing behind it like a comet. And by sparks he meant it literally. The front tires had somehow come off entirely, leaving only bare metal hubs grinding along the road. A cascade of orange-red sparks showered from the hubs. There was no time to think. He threw himself sideways. Sizzling metal and a dull, heavy thud filled the air. The driver of the sedan was trying to avoid him, but with nothing but metal hubs where the wheels should have been, steering was useless. The right front of the blue car smashed into the left side mirror of Lynn's car. The sedan kept sliding on, crooked from inertia, then fishtailed into a U-turn with a screech that made everyone wince. The rear tires then gave way under the stress, and like the fronts, were stripped away. The rear hubs carved 2 more lines of flashing sparks across the asphalt before slamming into the curb with a final thunderous bang. The car lurched, lost whatever little balance and power it had left, skidded a few more feet, then came to a shaky stop. Blue smoke rose from its hood. The 4 bare hubs reflected an awkward, ugly light in the sun. Lynn stood frozen for a moment, looking between his own car, now missing a side mirror, and the smoking, wheel-less sedan. Fury flared hot. "This is outrageous," he ground through his teeth and strode toward the other car. He rapped his knuckles on the sedan's window in a hard, insistent thump. "Hey, you in there! I don't care who you are, drunk driving or possessed by a troll. Get out here right now. We need to talk about compensation for my mirror." The door unlocked with a click and was shoved open from the inside. A figure climbed out. The first thing Lynn noticed was the bright, messy shock of pink hair. The woman looked to be in her 20s and wore somewhat flashy Auror-style robes. She bowed repeatedly, practically trembling with apology. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," she kept saying. "I didn't mean to. The car just went out of control. The tires, I don't know how they just... I swear I usually drive very carefully. Oh, Merlin, your car." Her contrition softened Lynn's anger for a moment. Who was she? From the ministry? Not exactly the look of a Mungo patient. "Stop apologizing for a second," he said, frowning as he sized her up. "Who are you and what the hell happened?" Before she could answer, the rear door creaked open too. A familiar figure stumbled out of the back seat. Harry. Lynn blinked in disbelief. Harry looked pale and shaken, as if the world had just tilted beneath him. He took several deep breaths, steadied himself, adjusted his glasses, and gave Lynn a weak, crooked smile. "Lynn, cough. It's a long story." He gestured toward the pink-haired woman. "This is Nymphadora Tonks. She wants me to call her Tonks. She's from the Ministry of Magic's Auror office." "Lynn, an Auror? Here to escort you to school?" Harry nodded, then shook his head. "She's here to bring me to school. I don't know why exactly. After the World Cup, she found me, showed me Ministry ID, and said that from today until I'm safely at Hogwarts and my situation is stable, she's responsible for my off-campus personal safety." He glanced back at the smoking sedan, eyes dark with lingering fear. "I asked her why. She said she didn't know, only that it was a directive from the ministry. Halfway through the drive, something went wrong," Harry went on. "The car went out of control. The hubs started scraping the road and sparking. Tonks tried to use magic to stabilize it, but whatever she did seemed to interfere and made everything worse. Sparks flew everywhere, and it ended up like this." He spread his hands helplessly. Lynn rubbed his chin and thought it over. He could see how this had come about. Panic at the ministry after the whole business with Barty Crouch being under the imperious curse. They'd be terrified that anything happening to Harry Potter, the savior, would become a political disaster. So they'd piled on extra protection measures, probably overreacting, but not without reason. 215, new semester begins. Along the long railway line, the Hogwarts Express puffed white smoke as it sped across the vast Scottish countryside. Inside one of the compartments, the atmosphere was relaxed. On the small folding table in front of Lynn sat a small bag of galleons, the compensation Tonks had given him. There was no need to go into the negotiations. The look on Tonks's face when she handed over the money had been pure misery. Beside him, William was absorbed in a thick History of Magic almanac. He looked up as if remembering something. "Oh, guess who I saw while I was shopping in Diagon Alley yesterday?" Lynn shrugged. "How could I possibly guess? There are half the population of the wizarding world in Diagon Alley every day. Did the Gringotts goblins get new bow ties?" "It was Professor Lupin," William said. "He was in Obscurus Books, the second-hand shop next to Flourish and Blots. Seemed like he was doing a spot of work, organizing books maybe. Working a part-time job." Edgar's eyes widened in shock. Is the pay for a Hogwarts professor really that bad? He had to take a job in a bookstore over the summer? William closed his book with a shrug. Who knows? Maybe he just loves books and went to help out while looking for rare volumes. Ollie, who had been listening quietly, turned his head and said softly, "Is it possible that Professor Lupin won't be teaching us this year? So, he's looking for something else?" The compartment fell silent for a moment. "Surely not," Edgar said hesitantly. Time slipped by, and the sky outside grew dark. It was already evening when the Hogwarts Express slowed and came to a halt at Hogsmeade. Lynn, who had dozed for part of the journey, rubbed his eyes as he sat up. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and pea-sized raindrops began to patter against the carriage window, soon turning into a steady sheet of rain. Tsk! Edgar peered out and shivered. What ghastly weather! It won't be fun for the first years crossing the lake by boat. They'll be soaked through. Good thing we're in the carriages. In the rainy night, a procession of carriages drawn by thestrals moved through the downpour. When the carriage carrying Lynn and his friends stopped before the great oak doors of Hogwarts, the rain had eased slightly, but the air remained damp and cold. As Lynn stepped into the entrance hall, something caught the corner of his eye. A round water balloon drifting toward him from a shadowed side corridor. It wasn't moving fast. Its path was obvious. Instinctively, Lynn stepped aside. "Why are you dodge?" Edgar, following behind, didn't notice the incoming missile. Splash! The balloon burst squarely on his face. Ice-cold water plastered his hair and trickled down into his collar, soaking him to the skin. "Ag!" Edgar yelped, leaping up to wipe his face. He spun toward the corridor to confront the prankster, but the shadows were empty, the culprit long gone. He could only fume for a moment. The two large doors of the great hall swung open from the inside. Professor McGonagall, alerted by the scream, stepped out. Her sharp gaze swept the hall and settled on Edgar. "Mr. Burns?" Her voice held its usual authority. "What happened?" Her eyes took in his dripping hair and robes and the small puddle at his feet, and she frowned slightly. Edgar hunched his neck. "Nothing, Professor. Really, nothing." He didn't want to start term off with points docked for causing a disturbance or alleged participation in a water fight. McGonagall gave him a long, suspicious look at his still wet face, but had more pressing matters. New students were about to enter. At last she said sternly, "Mind your appearance and behavior, Mr. Burns. Go in. The feast is about to begin." As if granted a reprieve, Edgar hurried along and, squelching, followed Lynn and the others into the great hall. Hogwarts looked as magnificent as ever. The 4 long house tables were set with gleaming plates and goblets. Thousands of candles floated above, casting a warm light. The enchanted ceiling mirrored the stormy weather outside. The Hufflepuff table was where Lynn and his friends sat, and soon the other tables filled as returning students took their places. The hall that had been empty all summer was instantly filled with the buzz of conversation, everyone eager to exchange stories of the break. The Quidditch World Cup was the hottest topic. The Irish keeper was unbelievably fast. "Vila, I swear I thought I'd fly off the stands." I kept one of the leprechaun coins as a souvenir, turned to stone by morning, though. A loud, heated argument came from the Gryffindor table. Even several tables away, Lynn could hear Ron's excited voice debating with Seamus Finnegan. "Crumb is the best seeker. That dive. Merlin, it was suicidal, but brilliant," Ron declared, full of admiration. "He lost the match," Seamus shot back, smugly wielding his favorite retort. "You don't get it. It was a tactic. He caught the snitch and did his job as seeker. The Bulgarian chasers were the problem. Crumb's flying and his decisiveness are unmatched." The sorting ceremony began as the doors to the Great Hall were pushed open again. Chatter stopped instantly. The first years, led by Professor McGonagall, filed in 2 by 2, timid and wide-eyed. Peeves materialized overhead, circling and cackling, pulling faces that made several of the new students shrink back and sent muffled laughter through the older tables. The traditional intimidation was late but effectively on schedule. This year the sorting hat was efficient. It hummed a few tuneless lines about the importance of unity without losing house identities, then got to work. It barely touched the first year's heads before shouting out the house names. William clapped along with the rhythm and nudged his roommates. "So fast, much quicker than when I started. I remember the hat took nearly 10 minutes deciding between Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff for me. Edgar, who had quietly dried most of his clothes with a quick drying charm, was eagerly guessing which house the next student would go to, and had even bet Ollie tomorrow's breakfast pudding on one of them. Lynn, growing hungrier by the minute, waited for the ceremony to finish. Half an hour later, after the last boy was settled into Hufflepuff, Professor McGonagall rolled up the parchment of names and stepped aside with the sorting hat. The hall went silent as all eyes turned to the headmaster, who rose slowly. "I think, after such a long journey, you must all be famished, so eat." At once, mountains of food appeared on the 4 house tables. The older students, who had been waiting impatiently, sprang into action. Cutlery clinked, and the hall filled with the sound of feasting. Lynn deftly speared a succulent roast rib and bit into it with satisfaction. The start-of-term feast was as dependable as ever. Thunder rumbled outside, and the great hall doors were suddenly flung open. A stranger stood in the doorway, oddly dressed and immediately catching every eye. Simulated lightning flickered across the enchanted ceiling, then a blinding white light flashed with a sharp shua, instantly revealing the newcomer's figure. He was a man whose weathered, fearsome face told of countless battles. Scars of different depths crisscrossed his skin. Some looked like cuts from blades, others like burns from spells or explosions, leaving him distinctly ugly. His left eye was ordinary. His right eye was a glass replacement that whirred and turned constantly. That false eye seemed to have a life of its own, darting around at high speed, scrutinizing every corner and every face in the great hall. Lynn froze mid-chew. That feeling of being scanned made him uneasy. Beside him, Edgar visibly started at the unannounced guest, hunched his shoulders, and nudged Lynn with his elbow. He lowered his voice and hurriedly whispered, "It's Mad-Eye Moody, Alastair Moody. Ever heard of him? He used to be the best of the Aurors. He's been retired for years, but the dark wizards he dragged in could fill half of Azkaban. He's terrifying." "Oh," Lynn said flatly, averting his gaze and resuming cutting his pork chop. "He sounds impressive." A retired Auror famed for catching dark wizards, Moody's entrance matched the rumors. Edgar leaned in further, worried Lynn didn't grasp how serious this was. "He specialized in catching dark wizards. He caught loads of dark wizards," he whispered, as if repeating it would make the point sink in. Lynn stopped cutting and looked at Edgar, whose expression practically screamed. "You know what I mean, right?" "No. What do you mean?" Lynn lowered his voice, but the helplessness in it was clear. He understood the implication. His roommates all suspected he had extensive experience with the dark arts. Edgar gave an awkward laugh, eyes flicking away. "Just a heads up. The new professor looks very professional, very vigilant. You should be careful." Lynn rolled his eyes and went back to his meal. By then, Moody had finished sweeping the hall with his gaze, at least his normal eye had, and limped toward the high table with the cautious gait of a man who expected trouble at any moment. Dumbledore stood to greet him, wearing his usual gentle smile, clearly used to Moody's ready-for-combat posture. The two men exchanged a few quiet words and a firm handshake. Then Dumbledore gestured for Moody to sit at the staff table on his right. Dumbledore turned back to face the students. "While you are enjoying your meal, may I interrupt briefly? I am pleased to introduce the new professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts for this school year, Professor Alastair Moody." His voice was warm. With Professor Moody's practical experience and profound knowledge of the dark arts, Dumbledore added, "I am sure he will provide you all with a most valuable course." An awkward hush fell over the hall. Applause was thin. Most students stared blankly at the newcomer, who was poking at a sausage with his small silver knife, sniffing it suspiciously before taking a bite. Compared to Lupin last year or Lockhart the year before, the atmosphere was noticeably worse. Moody didn't seem to care. His focus was divided between his food and a careful assessment of the hall's security. He chewed while that mechanical eye continued to sweep the room, lingering at windows and exits, as if calculating the best defensive and evacuation routes. Dumbledore watched the students' reactions, glanced at Moody, concentrating on his sausage, blinked, and smiled as if nothing could faze him. He sat down again and continued his own treacle tart. Time passed in the easy bustle of food and conversation. When the desserts were finally cleared, Dumbledore rose once more. The hall quieted quickly. The students knew an important announcement was coming. "While you are caught up in the joy of reunion and the hopes for the new year," Dumbledore said, his gentle tone now holding a rare gravity, "I regret to inform you of a change. After careful discussion by the professors and the Board of Governors, Hogwarts will not be hosting the Inter-House Quidditch Cup this year." "What?" came the instantaneous outcry. "No. Why?" The reaction was far louder than it had been for Moody's arrival. In a world where entertainment was relatively scarce, Quidditch and similar school events were major outlets for passion and pride. The Quidditch Cup stretched across the year and was the pinnacle of house glory and individual skill. Dumbledore's casual announcement felt like a blow to the chest for the Quidditch fans. Even students who weren't interested in the sport were upset and confused. Dumbledore allowed the students' protests to rise for a moment, letting the shock ferment. Clearly a practiced dramatic pause. When the noise subsided slightly, he continued without hurry. "This is because our limited grounds and the energy of the faculty must be devoted to a grander, more exciting, and far more challenging international event. The Triwizard Tournament, which has been dormant for centuries, will be resumed at Hogwarts this year." Silence fell. Younger students looked bewildered. Older ones, and those who remembered magical history, widened their eyes. Dumbledore wasn't finished. Furthermore, with the Ministry's cooperation, this will no longer be the traditional Triwizard. It will be expanded into a six-nation tournament. In addition to Hogwarts, Bosbatons, and Durmstrang, the Uagadou School of Magic from Africa, Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry from North America, and Castello Bruxo from South America will also send representatives to compete. The announcement struck like a thunderclap. For a few stunned seconds, the hall might as well have been muted. Then an uproar unlike any before swept through the students. Benches squeaked as many leapt to their feet. "The Six-Nation Tournament? Oh, Merlin. My dad said his grandfather took part in the last Triwizard." Dumbledore raised a hand to calm them. "I know many of you are eager to represent Hogwarts and win honor for the school in this historic event." His gaze swept over the older, excited faces. "However, all participating schools and the Ministry of Magic have agreed, after much consideration, that an age limit must be imposed for this year's competitors. Only students who have reached the age of 17 will be permitted to enter." "What? That's not fair. But I just turned 16. It's only a few months away." The earlier excitement drained away as younger students protested. Edgar thumped his chest and stamped in frustration. At 14, he was 3 years short of the requirement and excluded from what might be a once-in-a-lifetime event. Dumbledore, mindful of suspense, allowed a moment before softening his tone. "The age limit is meant to protect younger students from dangers they might not be equipped to face. It is a safety measure." He paused, then added with a subtle shift in expression, "However, the restriction is not without its shortcomings. If any among you can find a clever way to bypass or circumvent this age restriction undetected," he let the words hang, "then, in theory, you may still submit your name to the Goblet of Fire for selection." That statement sent a fresh ripple of hope through the hall. For those who were underage but unwilling to give up, the possibility, however remote, was intoxicating. Minds began to spin with ideas about how one might evade a magical restriction. Drowning out the excited murmurs, Dumbledore delivered the final surprise. Furthermore, after consultation with the other schools, and to better showcase each school's teaching and the breadth of our students' abilities, the format will be altered. For this six-nation tournament, each participating school will not select one champion, but 3. A cheer rose up, louder and more enthusiastic than anything that had come before. 3 slots meant more chances for glory. The Goblet of Fire will select 3 champions from each school on the eve of Halloween, Dumbledore concluded. In the months ahead, focus on your studies. Those who intend to try should remember, this tournament is no child's play. The dangers you may face are real and severe. This time, the applause that followed was genuine and sustained. The opening feast ended on a high, explosive note, the Great Hall buzzing with talk of champions, age limits, and the return of a legendary competition. 217. Stay vigilant at all times. The storm that had raged all night finally let up the next morning. The sky was no longer ink black, but it remained gloomy, as if another downpour could begin at any moment. Lynn and his three friends walked the path toward Greenhouse 3. After a night's rest, the students had recovered a little energy, but waking early for class was still a kind of torture for certain self-confessed night owls. Ha! Lynn rubbed his eyes and yawned, voice thick with complaint. No matter how often I do it, getting up early is a life-or-death ordeal. Whoever invented time clearly never considered students. William, clutching several thick herbology notebooks, glanced up. If getting up early is so horrible, why do you never mention how staying up late causes sleep deprivation? Lynn hesitated, then defended his position with twisted logic. William, you don't get it. Staying up late is about savoring the freedom of the night. It's an extension of the soul. Waking up early, though, is the brutal act of dragging that warm, dreamy soul into the cold world. They're completely different things. Edgar burst out laughing. Ollie silently pulled his scarf up a little higher against the chill. Professor Sprout had said at the start of term feast that this herbology class would deal with a particularly unpleasant but useful plant, the bubotuber. Specifically, they would learn how to squeeze its pus safely under strict protection. One didn't immediately associate that description with the pleasant word plant. It wasn't really a plant in any ordinary sense. In Greenhouse 3, each group was assigned a repulsive thing planted in a specially made pot. It looked like a huge, black, slimy slug barely pushing itself from the soil, its surface covered in ugly lumps and folds and occasionally exuding slick mucus. A master of deception would have been a good description. Its appearance alone made stomachs turn, and its interior was even more dangerous. Undiluted bubotuber pus was highly corrosive and could cause severe, hard-to-reverse burns on skin, making treatment a real nuisance. The students put on thick protective gloves, covered their faces with protective masks, and wore waterproof aprons, fully armored as if facing a great foe. Even normally cheerful Professor Sprout looked unusually serious as she demonstrated how to squeeze the pus, repeatedly emphasizing the safety rules. Lynn stared at the squirming slug in the pot, and an inconvenient memory flashed through his mind. He had made good use of bubotuber pus before. Back when Lockhart was still in his pomp at Hogwarts, Lynn, feeling some sense of justice, had crafted a concoction whose core ingredient was processed bubotuber pus, mixed with other elements that caused violent gastrointestinal reactions, and, well, loss of control over one's bowels. Lockhart wasn't the only target of such practical jokes. The ministry's senior undersecretary, Umbridge, had also experienced her share. She might even hate the stuff. The reason was simple. Under Minister Cornelius Fudge's brilliant leadership, the ministry's recent deeds had angered the wizarding public. During the year of the Chamber of Secrets attacks, many thought the ministry incompetent and negligent, and protest letters flew into the ministry like snow. Some of those enthusiastic letters included small bottles of undiluted bubotuber pus as gifts. After the Sirius Black affair, the deployment of Dementors to Hogwarts, and the search of the Express, and the eventual revelation that Sirius was wrongly accused, the public's gratitude, or sarcasm, took many forms. What better way to show feeling in the blunt, practical tradition of the wizarding world than by sending a meaningful bit of bubotuber pus? For a while, the minister's mailroom was a hazardous place. By rough estimate, of every 10 letters Fudge received daily, 7 might contain a little token of appreciation. People feared that poor Minister Fudge would refuse the gifts or that clerks wouldn't recognize their value. So they got creative, sealing pus in small bottles disguised as perfume samples, smearing it on the backs of stationery printed with urgent-sounding notices, even using scent-masking charms that would only release their stench when paper was warmed near a fireplace. And because a busy minister couldn't personally screen every letter, the job of sifting through the mail fell to his loyal senior undersecretary, Umbridge. After herbology, Lynn headed to his first Defense Against the Dark Arts class of the year. The classroom on the second floor had clearly been reorganized since Lupin's tenure. The curtains were drawn, and the room lit mostly by steady white lamps mounted on the walls. Behind the podium hung a large chart showing common dark creatures and their weaknesses. Next to it sat a glass case of strange, unsettling artifacts. Students filed in, and the usual chatter died down at the room's tense atmosphere. A moment after the bell, the rhythmic clunk, clunk of a cane striking stone echoed down the corridor. Moody hobbled in, his cane marking each step, his magical eye spinning wildly as it swept the room. "I received a letter from Professor Lupin," he said without preamble, his tone giving nothing away about his opinion of his former colleague. "He told me the general state of this class, what you've learned and what you haven't." He paused. To be honest, he snapped, voice merely adequate. "In my view, over the past 3 years, you've learned flashy moves rather than real skill. What you lack most isn't definitions or history, but practical knowledge and instinctive reactions for dealing with jinxes and dark wizards." He slammed the podium with a loud bang. Several timid students flinched. "So, put your books away. Stuff them in the bottom of your bags. We won't be needing them this term, at least not in my class." No one dared argue with the man, who looked as if he might pull his wand and hex any dissenters. Reluctantly, everyone pushed their textbooks into their bags. Moody seemed pleased with the discipline. He picked up the register and skimmed. "I recall we have an Order of Merlin recipient in this class." He hammered the words out. "Lynn. Yes, Lynn of Hufflepuff. Stand up, lad. Let the class get to know you." Every eye in the room turned to Lynn. He rose with a calm expression. "Lynn," Moody said, putting the register aside, "tell me, when facing the dark arts or a dark wizard intent on attacking you, what should you do? In your own words, don't recite the textbook. Direct, very Moody. No theory, only action." Lynn thought for a moment, drawing on his own experience. "Sir, if you've confirmed someone has hostile intent and is using the dark arts, you should strike first to seize the initiative." Moody nodded. "A reasonable answer, decisive and direct. In real combat, especially against a true dark wizard, that's sometimes more useful than any prescribed procedure." His tone hardened. "But maintain constant vigilance. The prerequisite to striking first is detecting the threat in the first place. The first thing an excellent auror learns isn't how to attack, it's how to survive. Only by surviving can you counterattack. Sit down." Lynn nodded and began to lower himself back into his seat. Just as his backside was about to touch the chair, Moody, standing atop the podium, suddenly raised the wand he had been holding without warning. 218. Has Lynn been caught? Almost the instant Moody's shoulder muscles tensed and his wand was about to rise. Even earlier, the moment his glass eye swept over the side pocket of Lynn's robes, the faint warning from Peter's jolt overlapped with Lynn's own intuition. His hand plunged into his robe pocket faster than thought. "Sprouting red," he yelled, snapping his arm out at a tricky angle. A glass bottle filled with a thick liquid flew from his fingertips, arcing straight for Moody at the podium. Moody's reaction was astonishingly fast. The wrist holding his wand flicked to the side, shifting the tip by only a fraction. The red streak of an Expelliarmus narrowly missed the incoming bottle. The spell's path remained aimed at Lynn. At the same time, Moody's free left hand waved, exerting a force on the bottle. It changed direction instantly and whooshed toward an empty corner of the classroom. Bang! Crash! The bottle smashed against the wall, shattering. Undiluted boobatuber pus splattered, leaving a cloud of white mist and a foul stench across the wall and floor. From start to finish, Moody never took his eyes off Lynn. His magical eye had already seen the little surprise in the pocket. Still, he had not expected Lynn's awareness and decisiveness to be faster than his. The Expelliarmus aimed at Lynn had been deflected by a split-second shield charm Lynn cast. The spell struck an empty chair behind him and knocked it back a few inches. The classroom fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was stunned by the lightning-fast exchange. Moody slowly lowered his wand, eyes fixed on Lynn. "Excellent alertness. Better than I expected," he said in a tone that made it impossible to tell whether it was praise. "Quick reactions, too, and very good at striking first." He paused and took a step forward. His wooden leg made a heavy thud on the floor. "To be honest," he continued, "before coming here, while speaking with a few other professors, someone mentioned they thought you stood a good chance of finding a way to bypass the age restriction of the Goblet of Fire. I was skeptical. Now," he gave Lynn a long, appraising look, I'm starting to believe it a little. The sudden assessment plunged the students into fresh shock. They glanced from the calm Lynn to Moody's stern face. Then, without anyone quite knowing who started it, sporadic applause broke out, then swelled, spreading like wildfire. They were applauding not only Lynn's dramatic reaction, but Moody's gritty, combat-oriented teaching style. Compared to dry textbook lessons, this was exactly the sort of instruction most of the students preferred. Moody allowed the applause for a moment longer, then slammed his cane to the floor. Quiet. The applause died quickly, though excitement and anticipation glinted in many faces. Moody stepped back to the center of the podium. "As I said before," he announced, "what you lack is practice, the knowledge to face the darkness. So speaking of the dark arts, we cannot avoid the most notorious of them, the unforgivable curses." A hush fell as fear flickered across many faces at the name. Moody paused deliberately, then barked, "Who can tell me? What are the unforgivable curses? Don't tell me you've been in defense against the dark arts for 3 years and still don't know this." A low buzz of whispered answers rippled through the room. Many students shrank back, unwilling to meet Moody's gaze or raise their hands. He slammed his cane down again. The dull thuds drowned the murmurs. "Look at yourselves," he roared. "Fear? Taboos? The Ministry of Magic thinks these spells are unsuitable for minors. Forbidden to discuss. I don't agree. Ignorance is the greatest danger. You need to know your enemy, know what they're likely to use against you. Bury your heads and pretend they don't exist, and when a curse lands on you, it will be too late to cry." His gaze swept the class and settled on Edgar. "Burns," Moody barked suddenly. Edgar startled so violently he nearly leapt from his seat, his heart hammering. "You shouldn't be a stranger to the unforgivable curses, should you?" Moody stared at him. "After all, both your parents work at the ministry. One of those spells, in particular, caused a lot of trouble for them." At first, Edgar broke out in a cold sweat. Had Lynn's secret been exposed? Did the professor know? Was he to be held responsible? Was he about to be expelled? But when the rest of Moody's sentence reached him, he realized Moody meant the Imperio. He swallowed. "It's the Imperio, Professor." "Correct, the Imperio," Moody's voice boomed. "One of the unforgivable curses. It can completely control another person's mind, turning them into your puppet. Think about it. If someone near you, or even you yourself, were placed under this curse, what would the consequences be?" He chose a transparent jar from under the podium, inside which a common spider crawled. Moody pointed his wand and muttered an engorgement charm. The spider swelled to the size of a palm and became clearly visible. Then, under the class's breathless gaze, Moody pointed at the spider and intoned distinctly, "Imperio." The spider froze, then performed a comical, eerie little dance under his command, somersaulting, spinning, and striking unnatural poses with its legs, utterly contrary to its instincts. The room was dead silent. Lynn felt he had learned something. Just as Moody prepared to lift the curse and move on, "Professor!" William raised his hand. Moody's glass eye flicked to him. "What is it, Smith?" William pushed up his glasses. "Sir, you've shown the effects of the Imperio. How can you tell if someone is under it? Are there reliable signs or any magical means to dispel it?" "Good question," Moody said with satisfaction, and he lifted the curse on the spider. "That's exactly what I was about to discuss, identification and response." He faced the whole class, his expression deadly serious. "If you notice someone's behavior suddenly becoming strange, illogical, or contrary to their usual character, say a gentle person becoming violent, a cautious person acting recklessly, or a family-loving person turning cold toward their relatives, you must be highly alert. Of course, that presupposes you know the people around you well enough to notice the change." He emphasized his next point. "But remember, abnormal behavior is only the start of suspicion, not evidence. Reckless accusations have serious consequences. A true master of the Imperio can hide it very cleverly." As for William's second question, Moody's lips curled in a mocking smile. "Dispelling it?" he said. "If you found a way to reliably break the Imperio, the Ministry of Magic would be delighted to award you an Order of Merlin, first class, and enough galleons to last a lifetime. Think how much trouble that would save them." Lynn couldn't help thinking, doesn't that mean the Ministry owes me a first-class medal already? Seeing disappointed faces in the class, Moody softened his tone slightly. Of course, there are exceptions and patterns. Most magical effects, including the Imperio, tend to weaken over time. A strong-willed internal struggle or intense external stimulation might help. However, he warned, this is by no means easy. The best defense is always to be vigilant and not give an opponent the chance to cast the spell in the first place. He looked at William. Any other questions, Smith? William shook his head. No, Professor. Thank you. Moody nodded. Then, let's look at the next unforgivable curse. 219. This is a bit bullying. On the weekend at Hogwarts, the usual academic rush had given way to a more leisurely pace. Sunlight poured through the tall windows and danced on the corridors as dust motes floated in the air. When Lynn and his 3 roommates strolled toward the big classroom used for the dueling club, they could already hear the crack of spells and Professor Flitwick's high, clear instructions coming from inside. Lynn peeked through the crack in the door. Pairs of students were already facing off on the platform. Flitwick's small frame moved about nimbly. He tapped his wand now and then to reinforce the magical barriers protecting the audience and shouted reminders to a student struggling at the far side of the arena. Keep your wrists steady, Miss Green. The power of a spell comes from determination, not brute force. Combine your dodging with footwork, Miss Brown. Don't just stand there like a target. Edgar pulled out his watch and glanced at its face. He scratched his head. That's odd. We aren't late, are we? Usually at this hour, the club is only just setting up. There aren't this many people. Why is everyone already fighting? Isn't there still half an hour before the official start? Flitwick's gaze swept over to the 4 of them, lingering at the door. He pointed his wand at a small side door with a sign above it. Participants, waiting, preparation area. The professor's meaning was clear. Don't block the doorway. Go inside and wait. Lynn and the others moved toward the little door. As soon as he stepped through, the noise of the room hit him, and he couldn't help smiling. Draco was sneering at Harry. Classic stuff. Scarhead, here to make a fool of yourself again? Better than some coward who only knows how to hide behind his father's name. Lynn pushed the door open wider and stepped into the waiting room. The sight surprised him. It was packed. Students from all 4 houses, first and second years with still childish faces and upper years watching with folded arms, filled the space. 20, 30 people at least. Some checked their wands, some muttered tactics to each other, others were clearly there just to watch. Draco and Harry stood at opposite ends, each surrounded by a small circle of friends, exchanging angry glances and barbed comments across the crowd. The sound of the door opening wasn't loud, but for some reason it drew a lot of attention. Lynn kept his face neutral and waved casually. Morning, everyone. There was a moment of silence, then a scattering of greetings. Morning, Lynn. Hi. Good morning. Draco immediately turned back to eye Harry's robes with renewed disdain. Harry glanced away and muttered something to Ron. With the gossip gone, Lynn and his friends found a few empty chairs next to Cedric and sat down. Edgar, who couldn't sit still, immediately started looking around, curiosity written all over his face. He elbowed Cedric. Cedric, what's going on today? Why are there so many people? I don't remember it being this lively even at the end of last term. They're already fighting outside, and there are a ton waiting in here. Cedric smiled, a little helplessly. He nodded toward the main arena. Professor Moody's teaching. His defense against the dark arts class, well, the man's methods are unique. He keeps telling us we're lacking practical experience and that the dueling club's the place to get it, so a lot of people got fired up this week. He added, Professor Flitwick probably heard and opened the venue early so everyone could practice freely. Cedric looked at Lynn. Speaking of which, Lynn, I heard people saying you almost defeated Professor Moody in class. Is that true? The tone was half skeptical. Defeating Mad-Eye Moody sounded like the stuff of school legend. Lynn waved his hand. No, that's just exaggeration. What actually happened was Professor Moody asked a question and then, just to test my reflexes, he fired an Expelliarmus while I was sitting back down. I was lucky and barely dodged it. I threw something to block his vision so I could get away. It wasn't at all defeating him. He was just testing me. Cedric considered that and nodded. That makes more sense. For a 4th year to beat a battle-hardened former Auror on the spot would be unlikely. Being able to react like that is still impressive. Professor Moody's strikes are fast and tricky. By the way, it's rare to see you at the dueling club on a weekend. You're usually fishing by the Black Lake or holed up in the dorm. Since you're here, would you be interested in sparring with me later? We could learn from each other. Cedric was polite. Part of him was curious about Lynn's strength. After all, Lynn had an Order of Merlin and several school service awards, but he truly wanted to spar and trade technique. Lynn smiled sheepishly, rubbed the back of his neck, and declined. I don't think that's necessary. It'd be a bit like bullying. Cedric took his tone as modesty or a reluctance to duel in public and nodded understandingly. Right. If I dueled you, it might be like taking advantage. After all, I'm 2 years ahead and have more practice. We should each find other opponents. Pfft! Ha ha! Cough! Cough! Before he could finish, Edgar, William, and Ollie, sitting nearby, couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing. Edgar laughed the loudest. He slapped his thigh and turned to clap Cedric on the shoulder, laughing until he had to dab at his eyes. Oh, Cedric, oh, you've got it all wrong. Edgar gasped between laughs. Cedric blinked at them, confused. What? Did I say something wrong? Edgar finally stopped long enough to explain, wiping tears of mirth from his cheeks. Cedric, what Lynn meant wasn't that you fighting him would be bullying Lynn. He meant him fighting you would be bullying you. Cedric's smile froze. His eyes went wide. He turned slowly to look at Lynn, who was now awkwardly scratching his head. Lynn, is that what you meant? Cedric had always been one of the school's top students, especially in practical classes. He'd always ranked near the top in hands-on lessons. Though Lynn had the Order of Merlin and several awards, Cedric was confident in his own abilities, and the idea that a younger student would be bullying him was absurd. Lynn tried to explain, voice vague. It's mainly that my style might not be suited for this kind of friendly club sparring. He hadn't denied it outright. Cedric drew in a deep breath, eyes flashing. In that case, Lynn, we absolutely have to have a match. Duel me. Now, let's see who's bullying whom. 220. Battle begins. The wait dragged on, dull, tedious, and increasingly irritating. On the surface, Lynn looked calm, even a little bored. Inside, he was turning over a knotty problem in his mind. How should he fight so Cedric wouldn't lose too embarrassingly? It was a question that stalled him. In the past, Lynn's opponents in practice or real fights had been magical constructs or vicious Death Eaters. He'd almost never dueled formally with a normal, friendly, same-aged classmate. He had no experience. Against enemies, he could justify using the Cruciatus Curse, chains of immortal hexes, Hand of Thunder techniques, and other nasty combinations. Efficiency and elimination were the goals. But Cedric was just an exemplary student with a good heart and good grades. Lynn briefly wished Cedric were a disguised dark wizard so he could go all out without worrying about dignity or consequences. Of course, that wasn't the case. A crisp bell rang through the waiting area, and a copper indicator light blinked on the wall. Another pair was cleared to enter the main arena. Cedric stood, straightened his robes, and met Lynn's eyes with determined calm. "It's our turn, Lynn." He said nothing more and led the way out of the waiting room. Lynn watched his back for a moment, shrugged, rose slowly, and followed. The instant they moved, the waiting room erupted. Edgar, William, and Ollie exchanged a look. Edgar couldn't contain himself. "Should we go watch?" "Front row. We have to get the front row." Ollie grunted agreement. William pushed his glasses up and snapped his book shut. "Let's go." Their move sparked the rest of the students, who'd been itching with curiosity. 4th year versus 6th year. Diggory against Lynn. A Hufflepuff civil war. Students spilled toward the viewing area. Even those who had planned to practice put aside their intentions to watch. Professor Flitwick, finishing instructions for the previous pair, was about to call the next group when he saw the surge of spectators pouring out of the tunnel. He blinked. "Quiet, maintain order." Waving his wand, he raised a transparent barrier in front of the viewing area to prevent crowding. Then he looked at the two boys who had stepped up. "Are you the duelists? Diggory and Lynn?" "Yes, Professor." Flitwick glanced at Lynn, who looked distracted, a trace of worry in his expression. He cleared his throat and cast a voice-amplifying charm so the whole room could hear. "Before we begin, I must repeat the rules of the dueling club." His eyes lingered on Lynn as if to hint at something. "First, It is absolutely forbidden to use any spells classified as dark arts, including, but not limited to, the unforgivable curses and their derivatives, or any jinxes that cause persistent pain or injury. Second, the use of any alchemical tools or magical items not part of the arena's equipment is forbidden. Third, causing serious or permanent physical injury is absolutely prohibited. Victory shall be determined by disarming your opponent or rendering them temporarily unable to continue. Fourth, you must not attack an opponent who has fallen or is clearly unable to defend themselves. Fifth, he rattled off 7 or 8 detailed rules in rapid succession, more than either boy remembered hearing before. Lynn had the distinct impression a few had been added on the spot. When Flitwick finished, he wiped his brow and selected a dueling platform with the thickest protective wards. Go up, children. Friendship first, competition second. They stepped onto the platform, bowed politely, took their starting positions, and faced each other, wands raised. Ready, 3, 2, 1, begin. Almost before the final word finished, Cedric moved. He flicked his wand and sent a nonverbal stupefy straight for Lynn's face. Lynn's response looked almost casual. He didn't even adopt a proper defensive stance. He held his wand and gave it a small, unconcerned wave. The tip traced a tiny arc. The stunning spell hit the air an inch from Lynn's wand. Its light contracted inward and then vanished as if swallowed by nothing. "Oh," the crowd gasped. "A beautiful nonverbal spell." Professor Flitwick's voice rose in excitement. Cedric felt a chill. He hadn't expected Lynn to deal with it so effortlessly. He redoubled his efforts. He moved his wand faster. A flock of birds, spun of conjured magic, sprang into being and beat toward Lynn like living things, flapping to distract his vision and movement. Cedric tapped one of the birds, and it transformed in midair into a snarling, vicious hound. The flock and the hound attacked from above and below in a clever pincer. Lynn still didn't dodge. He didn't move his feet. He raised his wand again. The magical birds froze as if someone had pressed pause. Even their wing beats became still. With a flick of his wrist, Lynn caused the frozen birds to collapse into plumes of gray smoke that dissipated. The hound, meanwhile, halted, then spun and charged at its creator, Cedric, faster than before. Cedric's stomach dropped. He'd never seen anyone seize control of a transfiguration so easily. Instinctively, he lifted his wand to cast a fire-making charm at the traitorous hound. Only his hand began to move on its own, swaying left and right, as though no longer responding to him. He looked at Lynn. Lynn stood steady, pointing his wand at Cedric's raised hand. His wrist twitched twice. Each twitch forced Cedric's arm to sway in time. "You lose," Lynn said. Unwilling to accept defeat, Cedric tried to speak the counterspell. Finite incantatum. He never finished. A perfectly aimed disarming charm hit his wrist, and his wand slipped from his grip. It spun through the air, traced an arc, and landed safely in Lynn's other hand. Silence fell over the platform and the audience. Cedric stood dazed, staring at his empty hand, then at Lynn, who held both wands. After several seconds, he breathed out and smiled, complex, accepting. "I lost. You're impressive." He stepped forward and extended his hand for his wand, and as a gesture of sportsmanship, Lynn returned the wand and smiled in return. "Good match, Cedric. We'll have another round sometime." "It's a deal,"